In the final chapter of my life, I wrote my last collection of essays titled Us. It recounted how Ethan and I met, got to know each other, fell in love, and reflected on the bits of wisdom I had gathered as life neared its end. Everything was calm until Ethan's diary went viral online. I sat in a wheelchair as camera flashes lit up around me, reporters swarming forward to ask my opinion on Ethan's diary. His writings revealed a decades-long, deeply hidden love for Megan, a love so pure it became a mythical tale of devotion. Overnight, my book Us turned into a massive joke. A review cruelly summarized it as the fantasy of a pitiable woman who was never truly loved. Emily, who was pushing my wheelchair, finally managed to squeeze us out of the crowd. Once everyone had left, she stood silently, looking at me with eyes full of pity and guilt. Emily was Megan's child. When Megan's husband passed away, she was at the height of her career. Unable to care for Emily, she was eventually adopted by Ethan and me. I raised her single-handedly. As a child, Emily was often sick and cried non-stop. I spent countless sleepless nights holding and comforting her, pouring all my love into her. After a long silence, Emily finally spoke in a hesitant tone. Aunt Megan wants to return to the country. She wishes to be buried alongside Dad after she passes away. Then, as if trying to soften the blow, she added, Dad endured so much pain in his life. Let this be his final comfort. I didn't respond, only staring at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Emily avoided my gaze. Before leaving, she said, Mom, please think it over carefully. After she left, my caretaker, Sarah, fumed with indignation. Don't listen to her. Ma'am, you and Ethan were together for over 50 years. How could they separate you two in death? What kind of nonsense is that? Ungrateful child. Even strangers understand what's right. But the one you raised as your own doesn't. Megan did return to the country, and her return drew significant attention. The cameras followed her every step, broadcasting her journey live. I watched as she stood in front of Ethan's grave, crying as though her heart would break. The headlines described their love as a world-transcending romance, moving countless viewers to tears. Meanwhile, I had become the punchline of a cruel joke. Megan came to see me. She knelt before me, thanking me for raising Emily and begging for my permission to be buried alongside Ethan. Ethan and I have already lost so much time together. If there's an afterlife, I don't want to lose him again. I didn't respond but turned to Emily. Do you agree? She lowered her head and nodded slightly before quickly adding, Mom, you'll always be my mom. I just have another one now. Emily had always been pragmatic, skilled at weighing pros and cons. Having a celebrated actress as her mother would undoubtedly benefit her career in ways I never could. I knew her well and wasn't surprised by her choice. I was just tired. With difficulty, I finally said, I agree. Let them be buried together. Whether as a final reunion or to fulfill his ancestral wishes, I agreed to it all. After everyone left, I asked Sarah to escort them out. Alone in the silence, I began to reflect on my life. Old age blurs memories, leaving only fragments of the past. I remembered the day Ethan and I chose the name Emily for her. I had asked him about its meaning. He had smiled and said, Life is a long journey. I hope she keeps moving forward with perseverance. In the end, Emily was not just about resilience. It was a reflection of distant love, a longing for the woman in another land who had always occupied his heart. I remember, before we got married, Ethan looked at me with guilt written all over his face and confessed that he couldn't have children. He told me that if I couldn't accept it, we could call everything off. He must have known how much I wanted to have a child of my own. Yet he still lied to me for so many years. I never doubted Ethan's love for me. I always thought he was simply someone who wasn't good at expressing his feelings. A relationship like flowing water, calm and steady, is what lasts, I believed. That was how we managed to stay together for so many years. But the overwhelming love pouring out from his diary showed me otherwise. It wasn't that he was bad at expressing himself. It was just that the person he loved wasn't me. I suppose I should hate him for it. But as I've grown older, even hate has become something I can't muster. All that's left is a faint sorrow that wells up from deep inside, spreading through every corner of my being. All my life, I sought truth. In the foreword of my essays, I wrote, I would rather have clear and certain darkness than see a blurry mirage of light. Yet my entire life has turned out to be one grand illusion. If I could do it all over again. That thought hit me with such force, like the desperate gasp of a drowning person reaching for air. When I woke up, I found myself back on the first anniversary of my marriage to Ethan. He had been working nonstop for weeks, so exhausted that he had fallen asleep on the couch. This version of him was still far from the globally renowned director he would become years later. At the time, he was just a young filmmaker trying to make his way. He had to handle everything himself. The set, the actors, every little detail. I knew how hard he worked, so I never blamed him. Not even when he forgot our anniversary. It wasn't until the sky began to darken that Ethan finally woke up, looking utterly drained. The first thing he said was, "Claire, you don't need to go to the audition for Far Away. Megan's husband just passed away, and she has a child to take care of. This movie is really important to her." Far Away was Ethan's film. When it premiered, it swept every major domestic award. It also launched Megan's career, making her the youngest actress to ever win the Golden Horse Award. After that, she became a sought-after star, with directors clamoring to work with her. This film was Ethan's first step in paving Megan's glittering path to stardom. But Ethan knew how much I had sacrificed for this role. Megan was his adopted sister, and he often said that family should always look out for each other. So, I kept giving in, again and again. But this time, I didn't want to back down. I stopped what I was doing and said, "But this movie is important to me too." He frowned, clearly surprised, and looked at me with a hint of displeasure. "Claire, you'll have plenty of opportunities in the future. Megan's situation is different." I rolled up my sleeves, revealing the bruises on my arms. For this role, I've spent the last 6 months braving the rain and wind, training at the martial arts studio every single day. "Ethan, what makes you think I should just step aside?" For a moment, he looked genuinely shocked. Then he softened, stepping forward to pull me into his arms. "Claire, I know you've suffered for this, but Megan isn't just anyone." "She's not just anyone," I said quietly, pulling away and letting my sleeves fall. "She's the woman you've been thinking about for decades. Isn't she?" His face froze, but I continued. "I'll compete with her fairly. Do you have so little faith in her?" That night, Ethan and I had our first real argument. We parted on bad terms, and I threw myself into the martial arts studio, immersing myself in the character's emotions. Far Away was groundbreaking for its time, one of the first films to tell the story of a woman's journey of growth. It later became one of the most iconic and pioneering works in film history. Its only flaw? The martial arts scenes, which lack strength and impact. I loved this movie. If it were possible, I wanted to make it even better. But I never expected Ethan to stoop so low for Megan. The night before the audition, he spiked my water with sleeping pills and turned off my alarm. Just like that, I missed the audition for Far Away. Without me as competition, Megan easily secured the lead role, as if it had been destined all along. That was how deeply he loved her. A man so upright and admirable in everyone else's eyes was willing to resort to something so despicable for her. It was late by the time Ethan returned home. I looked up at him, my gaze calm and steady. I didn't say a word, just stared at him. This was the husband I had loved for decades, the man I had poured my heart and soul into. There were no hysterics, no uncontrollable anger, just a cold bitterness that settled in the pit of my stomach. Ethan avoided my gaze, his lips trembling as he spoke in a conciliatory tone. "Claire, you'll be the lead in my next film. I know you've been wrong this time. Tell me what you want, and I'll make it up to you." Make it up to me with what? The years of mutual respect and civility that had always felt one-sided? The unwavering loyalty of someone who never knew he didn't deserve it? I continued to look at him, my face devoid of joy or sorrow. He stepped forward, trying to pull me into his arms, but I avoided him and said calmly, "I understand." That night, lying in bed and staring at the white ceiling, all I felt was unwillingness to give in. In my previous life, after missing out on this role, I adopted Emily, which meant sacrificing part of my career. As Emily grew older and started acting, she only ever landed supporting roles. The highest award she ever won was for Best Supporting Actress. My resolve hardened. I wasn't going to give up this time. The next day, I went to see Charles, Ethan's producer. In my previous life, Charles and Ethan were known as a golden duo. Their films couldn't succeed without the other. More importantly, Charles was the heir to the Way family, the largest investor in this film. Sipping his coffee leisurely, Charles smirked. "Mrs. Hayes, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. If someone can't manage their time, they don't deserve a second chance." I looked down, gathering myself, and when I raised my head again, my demeanor had shifted. My voice was low but firm as I recited, "A single pearl, buried for years in a dark cage, now catches the light, illuminating the mountain's bloom." It was a line from the movie, a poem recited by the protagonist, Athena Chu, after a lifetime of struggle. In this moment, I became her, and she became me. With decades of experience behind me, I understood the depth of those emotions more than anyone else. I brushed the foam off my tea and spoke gently. "A pearl like that is worth waiting for, Mr. Way." Charles's expression grew serious as he studied me. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Hayes, you're far more interesting than that blockhead Ethan." He gave me another chance. After seeing my martial arts performance, he sighed and said, "Where else could I find a star like you, Claire? This role was made for you." A month before filming began, Megan came to visit, bringing her child along. Her purpose was clear. She wanted me to temporarily care for the child. Over the past 6 months, I had grown attached to Emily, and the eventual adoption felt natural. In the kitchen, Ethan was cooking dinner. Ethan rarely cooked, and the few times he did were always when Megan visited. Megan loved his cooking, so he willingly rolled up his sleeves and prepared meals for her. What a grand display of love. I fought to keep my face neutral, suppressing the bitter smile threatening to surface. Instead, I simply observed Megan, a textbook beauty with her delicate features, dressed in mourning black, with a white flower pinned to her hair. She looked the part of a grieving widow. Her pale complexion and slightly drooping brows completed the picture. She sat across from me, holding her crying child, clearly at a loss. Megan had no experience with children and struggled awkwardly, not knowing how to calm him down. I noticed immediately that her hold was wrong. The baby's position was uncomfortable, causing him to cry incessantly. But I didn't move. I just sat on the couch, watching coldly without lifting a finger. It wasn't until Ethan stepped out of the kitchen, taking a moment from cooking, that he rushed to cradle the child in his arms with the utmost care. In my previous life, Ethan adored Megan's child as if he were his own. People used to say they'd never seen such a doting daughter-dad. Sometimes I wondered, if he could love someone else's child this much, what would it have been like if we'd had a child of our own? But now, looking back, it all seems so ironic. He doted on the boy because he saw a resemblance, traces of the person he truly loved. At dinner, Megan kept stealing glances at me, her expression hesitant and unsure. She didn't dare speak, but Ethan, ever attuned to her discomfort, took the lead. "Claire, Megan needs to start filming soon and can't find anyone suitable to care for her child. Could you help out for a few days?" I slowly swallowed my bite, sipped my wine, and responded coolly, "I'm busy." Ethan frowned, his tone sharpening. "Claire, we're all family. Stop being so childish." He always acted as though I should naturally accommodate everything, as if I couldn't possibly have my own matters to attend to, and any refusal on my part was just me throwing a tantrum. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze directly. He hesitated, his expression darkening before asking reluctantly, "Then what's keeping you so busy?" I dabbed at my mouth with a napkin, stood, and replied with deliberate calm, "You'll find out when the time comes. I've had my fill, so I'll leave you two to catch up." I couldn't help but wonder what expressions they'd wear on the first day of shooting, when the truth finally came to light. In the end, Ethan made all the arrangements for Megan. She had nothing to worry about and could focus entirely on her role. The first day of filming dawned gray and rainy, matching the opening scene of Far Away. The overcast skies seemed endless, as if the sun would never rise again. Ethan drove the family car to the set that morning. Though he wasn't late, he arrived to find everyone already assembled. The air buzzed with activity, but something felt off. Despite everyone being present, The ceremony had yet to begin. Lowering my black umbrella, I looked up and locked eyes with Ethan. His brow furrowed as he strode toward me, irritation clear on his face. Claire, why are you here? It's the first day of filming, and things are hectic. I don't have time for you right now. I brushed his hand aside and walked straight toward Charles. His eyes lit up briefly with surprise, a flicker of admiration that he couldn't quite hide. Today, I was dressed in the protagonist's signature black attire, a look that clearly satisfied him. I curled my lips into a faint smile. Charles clapped his hands, instantly silencing the crowd. Our lead actress has arrived. Megan whipped her head up, her face full of disbelief. Ethan's brows furrowed tightly as he muttered, Charles, I know you like to joke, but today isn't the time for games. Charles's smile vanished, his expression turning serious. I'm not joking. It was only then that Ethan seemed to realize that the situation was beyond his control. He gritted his teeth and said quietly, Megan was the lead actress we chose together. Since when can we change the lead at the last minute? Charles's face darkened, his tone growing cold. Claire is your wife. Don't tell me you didn't realize she was the better choice. He stepped closer to Ethan, clapping him on the shoulder. Ethan, for a director, art should be your only pursuit, not something to be swayed by trivial emotions. Megan left the ceremony in tears, shooting me a sharp glare as she passed. Ethan started to follow her, but the ceremonial fireworks sounded, rooting him to the spot. In the group photo that followed, Ethan stood in the center, his face stern and somber, while I stood beside him, smiling brightly. My time had finally begun. When filming officially began, the actress originally cast as the secondary lead suddenly fell ill and had to withdraw. Megan was quickly assigned to the role. I couldn't help but marvel at Ethan's dedication to her. He had orchestrated everything so meticulously. By chance, the first scene to be shot was a confrontation between Megan and me. The protagonist and the secondary lead had grown up together. But this scene revealed the secondary lead's betrayal. I stepped forward, trembling, gazing down at her from above with a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief. My voice broke as I said, Tell me it wasn't you. I advanced slowly, my eyes filled with sorrow and pain, which gradually gave way to cold determination. Then, with a sharp, clean motion, I slapped her. My sword spun with precision, pressing against her neck. In that moment, the protagonist truly wanted to kill her, to avenge her fallen brother. My eyes burned red, brimming with rage and anguish. Megan froze completely, unable to respond. She stood rooted in place, forgetting her lines entirely. The secondary lead was a richly layered character, a child of the streets, once fighting beggars for scraps of food, who ultimately betrayed the protagonist yet sacrificed her life for her in the end. Played well, the character would shine, becoming a highlight of the story. But it was clear Megan couldn't carry the role. Ethan called for a cut and immediately rushed over to check Megan's face, full of concern. His expression was one of pure heartache as he turned to me, dissatisfaction evident in his eyes. Ethan was notorious in the industry for being an exacting director. Actors often had to endure grueling winter shoots, plunging repeatedly into icy water, yet no one dared to complain. Megan, however, was his exception, his only indulgence. He retrieved an ice pack himself, gently pressing it against her face as he spoke in a soft, almost doting tone. Megan, that was already very good. Let's do one more take. Okay. I rolled my eyes internally. Good, I thought. What part of that performance was good? He had the audacity to call that good. Charles couldn't hold back a sarcastic laugh. Tell me, Ethan, what exactly was good about that? Let's try again. Megan wasn't frozen this time, but her delivery was halting and awkward. Cut, 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 Ethan called out, visibly distressed. Megan, however, wiped away her tears, her voice trembling but firm as she said, I can do it. If she put even half the emotion she showed now into her performance, this scene would have passed long ago. By the end, my hand was numb from repeatedly slapping her. Megan's face was swollen, and the look she gave me was full of resentment. Charles, lounging in his chair, didn't even lift an eyelid. If you could do it, Miss Megan, we wouldn't need to shoot this scene so many times. You might not be tired, but everyone else is. The crew, full of overworked professionals, had little patience for Megan's endless attempts to perfect her dedicated act. Charles, losing interest, left to negotiate investments out of town, unwilling to waste more time waiting for her to get the scene right. Over the next few days, Ethan painstakingly coached Megan through her performance. Scene by scene, filming finally progressed at a passable pace. Then came the protagonist's first major highlight, the iconic scene where she willingly enters the fray, wielding a long spear. One of the most celebrated moments in film history. I had spent weeks preparing for this scene, practicing every day with the stunt coordinator. But Ethan's final cut of the footage was disappointingly bland. They say a camera can capture emotion, that a director's lens has its own warmth. Under Ethan's direction, Megan always appeared untouchable, a serene, saintly figure. Her beauty was motionless, almost divine. In my previous life, I hadn't believed it. I told myself Ethan loved me and that Megan simply photographed better. But now I knew better. He loved her, and through his lens, she became untouchable, immortal. I could never compare. Why should all my efforts, all my sacrifices, still lose to a love that was so intangible, so fleeting? After countless takes of the spear fighting sequence, I was utterly exhausted. Ethan finally said, "Let's call it a day. We'll reshoot tomorrow." After the crew dispersed, Ethan approached me, his brows knit tightly in confusion. "You're not satisfied, are you? We've already spent so much time on this scene." I shot to my feet, stepping toward him so quickly that my legs, weakened from overexertion, almost gave out. Ethan moved to steady me, but I slapped his hand away. "Ethan, far away is your film. This scene is the protagonist's defining moment. Ask yourself, are you satisfied with today's footage?" Ethan said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. I was too tired to argue further. As I left, I turned back and said, "If you can get the shot right, I won't mind if, for now, you see me as Megan." Ethan's face stiffened, and I leaned in to whisper, "Do you really think you've hidden it so well?" I don't know if my words got through to him that night or if it was Charles's return to the set, but the scene was finally filmed to perfection. It wasn't without cost. The grueling spear fighting sequences left me with severe arm strain, but the set waits for no one. I gritted my teeth and kept going. Then the wire rigging malfunctioned. I had no strength left to hold on to anything as I fell. In that split second, I saw Ethan. Without hesitation, he ran. Not to me, but to Megan. How could I not feel heartbroken? I had known Ethan for over 50 years, and he was the person I relied on most. But I was never his first choice. The ground rushed toward me. I instinctively raised my hands to protect my face. For an actor, the face is everything. Far away was my first step toward changing my life. I couldn't afford to lose this opportunity. I told myself I didn't care. But in the end, I was trapped by my own obsession. Everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Sitting beside me was Charles. His expression exhausted. He let out a long sigh of relief when he saw me open my eyes. After confirming I was all right, his voice rose sharply. "Claire, how many lives do you think you have? Didn't the stunt coordinator teach you? When you fall, protect the back of your head." I knew how reckless I'd been and offered him a sheepish smile. It only made him angrier. He pressed his lips together, exhaled deeply, and finally said, "Claire, nothing is more important than your life. Rest well. You will always be the lead actress in Far Away." It wasn't until evening that Ethan finally came to see me. The concern on his face wasn't fake, but I still wasn't his first priority. Once, I believed he saw Megan as nothing more than a sister, that it was only natural for a brother to dote on his sister. But now I knew better. The reason I had never brought up divorce before was our 50 years together. Even with his diary in front of me, I couldn't bring myself to believe it. 50 years. Tens of thousands of days and nights. This was the man I had shared my bed with. And yet, in a life or death moment, he had chosen to abandon me. For the first time, I truly gave up on him. A wave of delayed anger surged through me, almost drowning me. It had been so long since I felt anything this strongly. Thoughts I had buried deep inside rose like a storm, impossible to suppress. In his diary, He wrote, Megan, I'm trying to love someone else. Claire is a good woman. Loving her would be the best outcome for all of us. But I failed. Love cannot be forced. Countless times, I questioned myself. Am I really so unworthy of love? 50 years of life. More than half a lifetime. Was there even one moment when his heart moved for me? But in the end, I didn't ask. Because it didn't matter anymore. It really didn't matter anymore. Ethan, once filming for Far Away is done, let's get a divorce. Ethan's face filled with disbelief. He stepped forward and grabbed my hand. Claire, I can explain. I struggled to pull my hand free. His touch reminded me of the absurdity of my life. The nurse walked in, frowning as she looked at Ethan. Who are you to the patient? She fell and hit the back of her head, resulting in a concussion. If the impact had been any worse, you might not be seeing her here now. Only then did it seem to dawn on Ethan how serious my injury was. His voice stammered. Claire, I didn't know. His regret and fear were evident, and he moved forward in a flurry to check my injuries. When he saw the bandages on my head, his expression twisted in heartache. For the next few days, Ethan stayed by my side constantly. No matter how cold or indifferent I was toward him, he refused to leave. Sometimes, when I looked at him, my thoughts wandered. In my previous life, I once had surgery. Ethan had canceled all his work to stay by my side, taking care of me for an entire year. Back then, I mistook it for love. But love cannot withstand comparison, especially when Megan was involved. I was always his second choice. After a week of resting in the hospital, I returned to the set of Far Away. The production schedule couldn't afford further delays. Ethan, burdened with guilt over my injury, stuck to me like a shadow after every scene he directed. He seemed to believe my mention of divorce had been nothing more than a moment of anger, something he could smooth over with a bit of coaxing. Megan, on the other hand, cast him several hesitant, longing glances. This time, however, he steeled himself and didn't respond. Ethan told me Megan was just his sister, someone he felt obliged to look after because of her frail health since childhood. He also said, We're married now. You're my wife. I'll try to love you more. I thought back to the timeline in his diary. This was the point when he was trying to love me. But love cannot be forced. Ethan, no matter how much effort you put into it. His gaze carried a flicker of struggle before softening into a faint smile. Claire, I'll be good to you, he said. Since he was willing, I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. Having the great Ethan personally coach me in acting was something I couldn't pass up. After the makeup artist finished with me, the room emptied, leaving only Ethan and me. This scene depicted Athena choose moral decline, where she temporarily strayed from her virtuous path. It was a critical moment of transformation for the character. Ethan had insisted on perfection, charm without vulgarity, allure with dignity. I studied the woman in the mirror. The bold red lips, perfectly styled waves, and the form-fitting cheongsam accentuating her curves looked unfamiliar. My naturally sharp features and strong brow made this seductive appearance feel almost alien. Standing, I reached out to grab Ethan's tie, pulling him closer until we were mere inches apart. In a low, breathy voice near his ear, I whispered, You say there's no end to suffering. Master, why not save me yourself? As I spoke, my lips brushed against his cheek, our breaths tangling together. For a moment, his composure faltered, and a faint blush climbed from his ears. In my previous life, I had never acted this boldly in front of Ethan. I'd read somewhere that men with insecurities in that regard tend to be more sensitive, so I had always tiptoed around his pride, carefully maintaining his dignity. I denied my own desires, hoping for a spiritual connection instead. What a joke it all turned out to be. Director Hayes, what do you think? I asked, stepping back and letting go of his tie. I lit a cigarette as I sank into a chair, exhaling a thin plume of smoke. Through the haze, I met Ethan's shadowed gaze. After a pause, he said quietly, Once Far Away is finished, we'll truly be together. I'll work hard to love you. How laughable it was that loving me had to be a matter of effort. But I didn't need such a pitiful handout of affection. Slowly exhaling another puff of smoke, I let the corners of my mouth curl into a faint, ironic smile. But Director Hayes, I said, my tone light yet biting, I've changed my mind. A man who can't isn't good enough for me. Unfortunately, someone happened to be passing by outside the door at that exact moment. They heard my words and dashed off like their life depended on it. Even more unfortunate was the fact that the person was notorious for being a gossip. The rumor that Ethan Hayes was incapable spread through the film industry like wildfire. During the remainder of Far Away's production, the crew exchanged furtive glances whenever they thought no one was looking. Under the weight of Ethan's increasingly dark scowl, the film eventually wrapped up. After completing the post-production promotions, we were finally done. I handed Ethan the draft of our divorce agreement. With a sincere tone, I said, "Ethan, if you truly love Megan, then fight for her. Don't let another lifetime slip away. My final gift to you is your freedom." There had been moments when I hated him so deeply I wanted to kill him, especially when I first discovered the truth. But after 50 years together, our relationship had grown so complicated that it defied simple labels. In this marriage, aside from love and children, Ethan had given me the respect and care I deserved. Letting him go was also a way of letting myself go. Ethan simply stared at me, his expression a little dazed. I sighed. People always seem to do inexplicable things at the wrong time. Take care of yourself, Ethan. I left the divorce papers on the table and stood to leave the cafe. March wind still carried a chill, and the breeze felt biting as it swept past me. But strangely, I felt a sense of relief. For the first time, my future would be lived for myself. After Far Away wrapped, I spent some time traveling, distancing myself from the life of Athena Chu. Midway through my travels, Charles came to see me. He invited me to star in a film called Years of Bloom. The Way family's young heir had grown tired of producing and wanted to try his hand at directing. If my memory served me right, Years of Bloom was the film that earned Megan international recognition when it was submitted to a foreign film festival. I remembered it vividly. Under the flashing lights of cameras, Megan walked arm in arm with Ethan down the red carpet. The bitterness and envy I felt that day stayed with me for years. I accepted Charles's offer and headed into the desert to film. What I didn't anticipate was that the shoot would stretch on for 3 years. During that time, I cut off nearly all ties with the outside world and poured myself entirely into the film. The director of Years of Bloom was infamous in the industry for being difficult to work with. No one ever knew when his films would finish. At times, I genuinely thought this movie would never wrap. When I wasn't filming, I would find a quiet corner and cry in secret. One day, I found Charles with red-rimmed eyes. Before I knew it, the two of us were hugging each other, crying into each other's shoulders. When we had cried ourselves out, we lay back on the vast desert sands, staring up at the countless stars scattered across the sky. The universe was so immense, and humanity so small. Thinking about it like that, all my past struggles seemed to fade into insignificance. Charles always had a way of lifting my spirits. He'd compliment me constantly. How well I acted, how good I looked, how articulate I was. He'd even joke about how my unwashed hair had character. Despite repeatedly telling myself that I was fine, that Ethan's lack of love for me was his loss, I would still fall into moments of self-doubt. But over time, Charles's relentless praise began to chip away at my insecurities. Slowly, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't so bad after all. When Charles confessed his feelings to me, my heart raced. I thought, at the very least, I don't dislike him. I accepted his confession. The unfulfilled regrets of my past finally dissipated into the air. It turned out that time truly could heal all wounds. Pain, love, hatred. When Years of Bloom finally wrapped and I emerged from the desert, it felt like I had lived a lifetime in those 3 years. Oh, and one more thing. Far Away won a major domestic film award, and the judging committee exhausted all their resources trying to locate me. Ironically, my unavailability made me the only absent recipient in the history of the prestigious Juling Awards to win Best Actress, unintentionally creating buzz around my name. I heard that Ethan and Megan got married, but somehow, they divorced not long after. Megan came to see me. In just a few years, her face had grown noticeably weary, undoubtedly from raising her difficult child, Joey. I figured she had finally experienced the struggles firsthand. In this tangled triangle of relationships, Megan always seemed like an outsider. She never asked for anything, simply letting Ethan plan everything for her unilaterally. In the end, All she did was stand at Ethan's grave, crying as she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know you loved me." But didn't she? After all those days and nights they spent together, how could she not know? I dropped 2 sugar cubes into my cup, watching them dissolve. Suddenly, I asked her, "Did you love Ethan?" Megan froze, staring down at the spoon in her hand. Her voice carried a tinge of sadness. How could I not love him? Then, with a sudden smile, she added, "But Claire, I'm not like you. I love myself more." After she left, I sat alone in the cafe for a long time. It wasn't until I saw Charles running through the rain toward me, his smile banishing the dreary gloom, that I felt a sense of clarity. In the end, Megan was simply a selfish person. Maybe she did love Ethan, but she loved herself more. That was why she could comfortably enjoy Ethan's devotion all those years while pretending to be oblivious. I had no intention of judging what was right or wrong because none of it mattered anymore. The day I moved my belongings out of the house, Ethan stood there, his eyes red and swollen as he clung to my suitcase, like a child who thought holding onto something tightly enough would keep it from leaving. He couldn't let go. I sighed and looked at him. "Ethan, let's go somewhere." Think of it as a way to end things properly. The place I took him to was a Taoist temple on Mount Sanqing. In my previous life, I had always wanted to visit it with him to fulfill a vow, but we never made it. Shrouded in mist, we walked silently up the mossy stone steps. "Ethan," I said, breaking the silence, "did you know there are 99 steps here?" Once, I climbed them, bowing at every 3rd step. Ethan looked puzzled, but I continued. "That was when you were overseas filming and encountered those bandits. I didn't know whether you were alive or dead. I was powerless, so I could only turn to the gods." His expression grew increasingly complicated, and he seemed like he wanted to say something, but all he could manage was a soft, "Claire." "Ethan, your feelings for me are like those of a child's attachment to a lost toy. First, you can't bear to part with it, but soon enough, you forget all about it." I climbed a few more steps, pausing before adding, "These are things I could never bring myself to say before. Admitting that someone doesn't love you is a blow to anyone's pride. But now, I've let it all go." Ethan suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my hand. "Claire, that's not true. You're wrong. What you're saying is just an assumption." I smiled faintly. "Ethan, if I hadn't asked for a divorce, if everything had gone the way you imagined, us staying together for the rest of our lives, would you have loved me?" He was silent for a long time, his expression pained. When he finally spoke, it was more to himself than to me, his voice trembling. "No, Claire, I do love you. I'll realize that I love you." By the time we reached the summit, we encountered a Taoist priest who stopped us and offered to read our fortunes for free. He looked at me, narrowing his eyes with an air of mystery. "Mississippi, you've come from far away, haven't you?" I smiled but didn't reply. These wandering fortune tellers always like to spout vague, mystical lines. The man lightly shook the bell in his hand, the sound carrying as though from a distant place. Ethan and I stood at the center of what felt like a swirling vortex, the weight of the future rushing toward us. From Ethan's perspective, it seemed as though he was waking from a long, endless dream. In this dream, he and I spent our lives together, growing old side by side, supporting each other through everything. He saw the day his diary was exposed, the way I stood dazed and helpless, surrounded by a crowd. He felt a dull ache in his heart, and he tried to push through the throng to reach me, wanting to shout, "It's not true." But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break through. He saw me bowing at every 3rd step of the 99 steps, praying for his safe return when he was trapped overseas. He saw us as a family of 3, walking hand in hand across a sunlit lawn. In those moments, his happiness felt tangible, real. But that reality, so vivid, made him question. Ethan was a filmmaker, and films are constructed stories, fictional narratives. And so, he began to construct a dream for himself, a dream of far away. It wasn't that he had never felt anything for Megan, but his feelings for her were little more than the fleeting stirrings of youth, yet the unattainable always seemed more precious. Over time, his fantasies turned that fleeting affection into something far deeper, overshadowing everything else. He lost sight of what was right in front of him, When the dream finally shattered, it felt like waking into a world he no longer recognized. In this waking world, 25-year-old Claire stood before him, her head bowed, chanting prayers. But the person she sought to protect and pray for was no longer him. The next time he saw Claire was at an awards ceremony, surrounded by admirers. She descended gracefully from the stage. Her gaze didn't linger on him. There was no need. She was the very embodiment of light itself. But when she looked at the man beside her, her lips curved into a gentle smile, and she took his arm. That's how it should have been all along. Her brilliance, her joy. His misplaced love had blinded him. Ethan bitterly downed the glass of wine in his hand and walked into the night. He could have spent his life in happiness, but in the end, he destroyed it all himself. From then on, the long road of life would be his to walk alone. The first story has concluded. We invite you to listen to the second story. When I performed at the Golden Hall in Vienna, I revealed the bullying I had endured at Emily High School, armed with irrefutable evidence. I thought I would finally receive the long overdue justice I deserved. But to my utter horror, my husband, Adam, slit my throat in front of everyone. His eyes were bloodshot as he roared at me. Do you know that Emily suffered from depression? His face was still the refined, gentle one I had loved most. Yet now it twisted into the likeness of a vengeful demon. It was as if he couldn't wait to tear me apart piece by piece. Emily is dead. And it's all your fault, he screamed. Why couldn't you just let it go after all these years? Why did you have to bring it up again and kill her? Was exposing the truth about Emily's bullying really such an unforgivable crime? Had enduring years of torment and pain, simply to seek justice for myself, made me the villain? His expression was terrifying, a look I had never seen before. He was completely unhinged, saliva flying onto my face as he bellowed. Emily was such a kind person. She lived in guilt for 20 years over what happened in high school. She even gave me up to you because of it. Do you know what a good person she was? You only suffered 3 years of bullying. She just wanted you to suffer a little, not ruin your life. You endured for 3 years. And that proves Emily did nothing wrong. How dare you expose her bullying in public? Don't you know she couldn't handle the shame and ended up committing suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning? You're a murderer. Give Emily her life back. I struggled to lift my head, my lips trembling as I tried to speak, but I had no strength left. I could only watch as he kicked me to the ground and stabbed me again and again in a frenzy, turning me into a human sieve. Blood pooled beneath my motionless body like blooming snowflakes. Adam hunched over, looking like a feral beast ready to pounce. His hatred so intense he seemed determined to grind me into blood and dust. That moment, I finally understood. For 20 years, I had never truly existed in his heart. All he cared about was Emily, the same Emily who had bullied me for 3 years in high school, beaten me half to death, and nearly destroyed my hand, knowing full well I was a violinist. Listen to what he's saying. Does any of it make sense? I survived those 3 years of hell, clinging to the hope of one day exposing the truth and getting justice. Was it wrong to do so because the bullying didn't kill me? Does surviving mean the bullying wasn't a crime? Just because Adam married me, does that erase the damage and make everything even? And what compensation? He never told me anything about this so-called atonement for Emily. How was I supposed to know that giving up a man cost her nothing and was somehow meant to repay me? I gave you a man. Shouldn't that settle the score? I married you to atone for her sins. Shouldn't you accept that and kneel in gratitude? Since when does forgiveness not require the victim's consent? What does Emily's suicide have to do with me? Bullying is innocent, but exposing it is a crime? Where in the world does that make any sense? I was unwilling to accept this. I had just begun realizing my dream of a world tour, and this was only the first performance. Why did my life have to end because of this deranged couple? Why? As a victim, did I have to endure such a nightmare? In the final moments of my life, all I heard was the sound of a gunshot. The SWAT team shot Adam in the head as he was still stabbing me. How unfair. If there's a next life, I'll make Adam taste the small bit of suffering he so casually spoke of. I'll make sure he knows what it feels like to wish for death over life. As it turns out, fate is fair. It wasn't until the teacher shouted at me to get out of the classroom and stand in the hallway that I realized I had truly returned to high school. The sweltering summer heat, the stuffy classroom, The clattering of the ceiling fan spinning above, the drowsy students in the back row, and the restless cicadas chirping outside the curtains. All of it was so different from the modernized classrooms of 20 years later. I pinched my arm hard, and the sharp pain spreading from my arm to my brain confirmed it. This wasn't a dream. I had actually returned to high school. Before I could process it, an impatient shout came from inside the classroom. "Lynn Taylor, if you're not going to behave while standing in the hallway, then go home." The room erupted into laughter. The loudest laugh came from Emily Carter, who sat casually at a desk in the middle row, blatantly playing with her phone. So brazen. Yet not a single teacher dared to discipline her. There was only one person in the class who didn't laugh. He gave me a brief, indifferent glance, then returned his gaze to the podium. It was Adam Green. I would recognize that face even if it turned to ash. The lingering pain in my body seemed to resurface the moment he looked at me. My whole body trembled with rage as I lowered my head, clenching my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, the sting amplified by the sweat on my skin. "Adam Green, you truly deserve to die," compared to those who mocked me outright. His silence felt like a veil of false kindness, but that was nothing more than my naive interpretation back in high school. There's a saying, if you see a bully tormenting someone and don't intervene, whether you feign neutrality or coldly watch from the sidelines, you're still helping the bully. The only difference is that bystander apathy comes without a moral burden. The fact that Adam could fall in love with Emily Carter only proved that he was a bully. 2. Closing my eyes, I recalled his words when he killed me. "Emily just wanted you to suffer a little. She never wanted you dead." Oh, how light his words were. Let him experience it himself and see if he can still speak so callously. Emily bullied me simply because Adam and I had once performed together as freshman representatives at the school auditorium. He played the piano while I played the violin. That single duet sparked rumors among our rowdy classmates, calling us a perfect match. Just one careless comment was enough to ignite Emily's fury. I still remember the first time she bullied me. She pressed a scorching curling iron against my arm, leaving twisted scars that never fully healed. She wielded it as though she wished she could stab it into my eye. "Lynn Taylor, you're just some broke nobody trying to seduce our top student. Look at yourself. Do you think you're worthy?" She sneered. "Your family is so poor they work for others. Yet here you are pretending to be classy, playing the violin. What? Hoping to marry a rich guy like Adam Green and live the high life." The curling iron seared into my neck, leaving a scar so deep I would wear turtlenecks for the rest of my life. Now, I was about to relive the first moment of her bullying. As soon as school ended, Emily and her lackeys dragged me into an abandoned auditorium where no one would pass by. "Bitch." Those were Emily's first words to me after 20 years. She slapped me hard across the face, her hand swinging with such force that it stung even after all this time. As she shook her hand off, a smile played at her lips, innocent yet cruel, a chilling contradiction. "You've got some nerve," Emily Carter sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "Flirting with Adam Green behind my back? Think you can grab his attention by acting out in class? Even after being sent to the hallway, you still don't behave." With a sharp slap, she struck my face again. The force sent me stumbling back several steps until one of her lackeys kicked the back of my knees, forcing me to kneel on the ground. Emily yanked my hair so hard her manicured nails dug painfully into my scalp. "Adam looked at you today, didn't he? Feeling smug about it?" she hissed. A wave of dizziness overwhelmed me. It took a long moment for my vision to stabilize and the blurred figures around me to merge into Emily's face. My mind raced back to this exact day in my past life, recalling the events that followed. Even 20 years later, in my previous life, the memories haunted me, a nightmare I could never escape. Yet to Adam, all of this was just a trivial remark. Emily just wanted you to suffer a little, not kill you. If these nightmares were nothing to him, then perhaps he should experience them himself. I raised my head slowly, ignoring the stinging pain on my cheek. "Adam told me he has a crush on you," I said, my voice steady despite the throbbing ache. "He told me to stay away from him to avoid any gossip about the two of you." Emily froze, momentarily stunned by my words. Even her hand, poised to grab a curling iron, hesitated. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I could tell she was agitated. Emily was fiercely proud and couldn't stand anyone outshining her. Back during our freshman performance, the idea that I could share a spotlight with Adam had already infuriated her. Had it not been for her being voted school beauty by a landslide, my suffering might have started even earlier. Now, I had dropped a bombshell. News that the man she had her eye on might actually harbor feelings for her. The satisfaction of conquering such a perceived rival would undoubtedly consume her. Her grip on my collar tightened as she demanded, "Say that again. Repeat what you just said." I exhaled deeply and raised my voice. "Adam told me he has feelings for you. He said he's interested but didn't want to approach you because our classmates keep linking his name with mine. He's worried about causing trouble for you. I think if you confess to him boldly, he'd cave in no time. After all, everyone says a woman pursuing a man is like crossing a thin veil." A faint blush flashed across Emily's face before she quickly masked it with a smug expression. She released me with a satisfied huff, her lips curling into a triumphant smile. Since he told you that, you'd better behave from now on and stop hovering around him. Got it? I nodded weakly. Emily's mood seemed to lift as she hummed a tune, signaling for her lackeys to follow her out. They left me alone, trembling on the floor, blood trickling from my lips as I forced a smile. With Emily's arrogance and impulsive nature, I was sure she wouldn't wait long. By the next day, she'd make a bold, public confession to Adam, but Adam, valuing his pride, would never accept. And when Emily's ego was bruised, she'd undoubtedly lash out to reclaim her dignity. They were a perfect pair, selfish and egotistical to the core. Watching them tear each other apart would be satisfying. As expected, the very next morning during the school's break period, before the teacher entered the classroom, Emily Carter and her lackeys had already surrounded Adam Green. Emily, wearing her school uniform modified to accentuate curves far beyond what was typical for her age, lifted her chin high with pride. "Adam, I know you've had a crush on me for a long time," she began confidently. "You just didn't want to cause me trouble with all the gossip going around school." She paused, then casually perched herself on the edge of Adam's desk. Her thigh-high stockings pressed into her pale skin, creating a soft curve that carried an air of deliberate seduction. "You should have told me earlier," she continued. "I don't care about what people say. As long as you nod now, you'll be my boyfriend from this moment on. I'll take care of you." Adam, however, acted as if he were blind. Even with her legs blatantly in his line of sight, he kept his head down, focused on his homework as if she weren't even there. Emily's smile began to falter. Embarrassed, she slammed her manicured hand down on his test paper, the diamonds on her nails tearing for jagged lines into the sheet. Finally, Adam looked up at her, his gaze calm and unyielding. "When did I ever say I liked you?" he said, his voice cold. "You're disturbing my studies." He paused for a moment, then added, "Coming out of nowhere and saying I have a crush on you. Has anyone ever told you how self-centered you are?" Emily hadn't expected such a blunt rejection. Her practiced, flirtatious smile froze awkwardly on her face. Meanwhile, I buried my face in my arms, biting my sleeve to stifle the laugh that threatened to escape. Adam was as proud as a stubborn rock in a filthy bathroom, unyielding and arrogant. Back then, when he pursued me, I thought it was because of our shared experiences of hardship, a bond forged from mutual understanding. Now, I knew better. His so-called affection for me had been nothing more than an effort to atone for Emily. Adam's family had once been wealthy, but his father's gambling addiction had squandered everything. After losing their fortune, his father became an alcoholic and died in a car crash, leaving nothing but wreckage. His mother, unable to bear the stress, passed away not long after, though Adam was left with nothing. He clung fiercely to his pride, refusing donations and instead working 10 times harder to earn the top spot in school and sustain himself with scholarships. In many ways, his fall from grace mirrored my own family's downfall. My parents had been ruined by deceitful business partners, leaving us heavily in debt. Back then, I thought Adam and I were seeking solace in each other, but now I realized I had been fooling myself. This proud young man could only maintain his dignity through his arrogance. Naturally, he found Emily's ostentatious flaunting of her wealth and power utterly repulsive. Still, his disdain for her was tempered by the undeniable beauty of her face. The tension between them was palpable, like the sharp clash of a needle against a grain of wheat. All that was needed was a spark to ignite the fire, and I was more than willing to provide it. Lowering my voice, I murmured from within the crowd, "No way. Is the top student actually shy? We all heard you tell Lynn to keep her distance from you because you didn't want her getting the wrong idea. You said you already like someone else, didn't you?" I raised my voice slightly, making sure my words carried. "You, of all people, having a crush? The only person you'd be interested in has to be the school beauty, right? Don't hold back. Just admit it. Be together. Be together." My instigation took root immediately. In the group mentality of high school, especially among those who feared offending Emily, my chant quickly spread. Soon, the entire crowd was shouting, "Be together. Be together." Adam, now the center of attention, was visibly uncomfortable. Emily, on the other hand, seemed quite pleased with the crowd's reaction. Her head tilted proudly, her chin lifted like a princess basking in admiration. Emily Carter repeated herself, declaring once more that Adam Green should be her boyfriend, as though dating her was some kind of divine blessing. Adam's face turned pale. His gaze swept around the room as if searching for something, or someone. I guessed he was likely looking for me, the unlucky scapegoat who had once been paired with him by rumors. Maybe he wanted to use me as an escape tool from this mess. But he wouldn't find me. I was hidden in the deepest corner of the crowd, far out of sight. After scanning the room in vain, Adam bit his lower lip, his neck stiff as he stood his ground. "I'm not interested in you," he said firmly. "Stop deluding yourself. A student's primary focus should be on studying." Now it was Emily's turn to feel humiliated. Her face flushed green with anger, and I even caught a cold laugh escaping her lips. I could already predict what awaited Adam: the familiar small auditorium, the familiar sound of slaps and shouts. It was all playing out in my mind like a haunting memory. From afar, I could almost hear Emily's shrill voice echoing in the space. "Adam Green, who do you think you are? I was willing to make you my boyfriend out of the goodness of my heart. And this is how you repay me. I throw you a little kindness, and you dare to act like you can paint the whole canvas with it. Just like in my previous life." She grabbed his face with one hand, slapping him hard across the cheek without hesitation. The crisp sound of the strike reverberated through the space. "You're just a broke nobody pretending to be some kind of young master," she sneered. "How dare you give me attitude? Do you even know your place?" Adam's eyes filled with disbelief. He seemed stunned that the Emily he knew, the one who still maintained some semblance of humanity in public, had transformed so quickly into a vicious demon. It was especially evident when Emily grabbed a scorching curling iron, freshly heated after styling her hair, and pressed it against Adam's arm. His muffled screams barely escaped his mouth before a pair of dirty socks were shoved in to silence him. I could see faint wisps of white smoke rising, accompanied by the acrid smell of burning flesh. The smell seeped through the cracks in the window, tickling my nose, and I couldn't help but feel an unexpected satisfaction. Sweat dripped down Adam's forehead, and his complexion grew paler with each passing moment. Despite his evident pain, Emily's angelic face twisted into a devilish smirk. "Do you give in now, Adam?" she taunted, lifting his chin with the tip of her shoe. "Kiss my foot, and maybe I'll let you off this time." Adam remained silent. His head hung low. I didn't need to see his face to know that he was clenching his teeth so hard he might shatter them. The more defiant he acted, the more it fueled Emily's predatory instincts. Her hunger for dominance only intensified. Seeing Adam as a prize worth conquering, the thrill of breaking him, of asserting her power, sent waves of euphoria through her. Adam had never seen this side of Emily before. In his eyes, she had always been the fragile, remorseful girl haunted by her past mistakes, a victim of her own immaturity during high school. In Adam's eyes, Emily was someone who had been kind and pure, a misunderstood soul whose guilt over her high school wrongdoings had led her to a tragic end. He blamed me for exposing her actions, which he believed had driven her to suicide. How laughable! If Emily had truly repented, she would have apologized to me, sincerely, even once, over the past 20 years. Now, it was Adam's turn to face the unmasked Emily. Stripped of her facade, it was time for him to experience her true colors firsthand. I turned to leave but caught a glimpse of Adam Green's gaze suddenly shifting toward me out of the corner of my eye. He had seen me. Adam really had seen me. The next day, he showed up in long sleeves, looking utterly exhausted. He avoided eye contact, his eyes darting nervously, his movements hesitant. After glancing back multiple times, he finally slipped me a note when collecting homework. The note contained a time and place. He wanted to meet me privately at the music hall where we had once performed together. The crumpled paper, slightly damp and shaky in its handwriting, betrayed his fear. It seemed that after I left yesterday, Emily Carter hadn't stopped with just his arm. She had gone further. The entire day, Adam kept sneaking glances at me. His gaze carried a mix of curiosity, pleading, and, above all, hope. I could guess what he wanted. He hoped I would be a witness, someone to expose Emily's crimes. At the very least, he wanted to drag me into this mess with him, to sway me. He'd even chosen the music hall, likely hoping the memory of our duet would stir some sentimental feelings and prompt me to act on his behalf. If I were still an oblivious high schooler, I might have fallen into this trap. What a despicable person. In my past life, I endured 3 years of bullying while he turned a blind eye. Now that it was his turn to suffer, he was suddenly in a hurry to act. No need to rush. Adam, your reckoning has only just begun. I deliberately turned back to look at him, giving him a slight nod. Adam's eyes lit up instantly, brimming with excitement. In that moment, his charming almond-shaped eyes sparkled with a hint of ambiguous emotion. Let him stare a little longer. The more he hopes, the harder his fall will be. When the appointed time came, I arrived as promised. The moment I opened the doors to the music hall, a beam of light streamed in, landing directly on Adam's face. The sunlight cast a sheer, ethereal glow over him, accentuating the sickly pallor of his complexion. For a fleeting moment, he looked like someone who might collapse any second. Perhaps Emily hadn't gone far enough. Otherwise, how did he still have the strength to put on such a performance in front of me? Adam's face lit up with a hint of delight as he saw me. "Lynn, you came," he said, his smile measured to perfection, as though crafted to make others feel at ease. Such theatrics. Why wasn't he in showbiz? I nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Adam." He jumped down from the stage, clearly attempting to maintain an air of elegance. Unfortunately, his current physical state wasn't up to the task, and he nearly face-planted. I stood to the side, watching his clumsy recovery with a mix of amusement and disdain. If only Emily had been a little more ruthless, maybe she would have finished him off. What a poetic ending that would have been. An unworthy man meeting his end at the hands of the woman he supported. Adam stumbled for a moment, glancing at me with an embarrassed look when he realized I had no intention of helping him. Propping himself up on the armrest of a nearby seat, he managed to stand, though not without difficulty. His face flushed briefly before he turned to me with a pleading expression. "Lynn, you know the truth," he began. I was beaten by Emily Carter," Adam Green stammered. "I know you saw it. You're the kindest, most righteous girl in school. You would never let something as heinous as campus violence happen to a fellow student, right? Lynn, you'll help me, won't you?" He looked as though he had suffered the greatest humiliation imaginable, right in front of me. He began unbuttoning his shirt one button at a time, revealing the crisscross scars on his skin, marks left by kicks, punches, and burns under his long-sleeved shirt. If I were still a naive high school girl, I might have been overcome with righteous indignation and agreed to testify for him without a second thought. But unfortunately for Adam, I'm not that foolish. If I had agreed, Emily Carter would have immediately turned her wrath on me. With her family's power and influence, it would be all too easy for her to sweep this matter under the rug and silence Adam with a bribe. Adam would take the money and disappear, leaving me to bear the brunt of her fury. He had endured the rain, and now he wanted to rip apart my umbrella to shield himself. The thought made me sick. How could I have ever been attracted to someone like him in my past life? I stood there expressionless, staring at Adam without blinking. I kept my gaze fixed on him until he squirmed under the scrutiny, instinctively shrinking back. Only then did I let out a soft chuckle. "Wow, Adam, I never would have thought you'd get into fights after school. You're saying Emily Carter beat you?" Do you think I'm blind? I continued, my tone light and casual, even as I wove blatant lies. Emily likes you so much it's practically written all over her face. She's been openly chasing you at school. Anyone with eyes can see it. Don't slander her like that. Okay, you probably got into a fight with someone else and ended up like this. How can you throw mud on a girl's name like that? As I spoke, my face remained calm, my voice steady, not betraying the slightest flicker of guilt. I lifted my eyes to meet Adam's, watching his expression twist into one of utter disbelief. He looked at me as though he couldn't comprehend how I could lack even a shred of sympathy for him. Once, I had harbored a faint admiration for Adam. On stage, during our duet, the atmosphere had been just right. For a young girl, it was easy to mistake such fleeting moments for genuine affection. But that faint admiration had long since been obliterated, shattered to dust by the countless stabs and betrayals in my past life. Now, I only wanted to see Adam and Emily destroyed together, with nothing left of them. When Adam reached out to grab my sleeve, I coldly shook him off. My voice, now tinged with frost, cut through the air. Adam, have some self-respect. Don't tarnish a girl's reputation just because you're in trouble. And don't drag me into your mess. Take care of your own problems. Adam's desperation flared as he shouted, you and everyone else have been fooled by that little witch Emily Carter. She doesn't like me at all. She's just using me as a plaything. They beat me, insult me, and even tried to ruin my hands so I can't play piano anymore. I swear, every word I'm saying is true. I swear to God. Swearing to God? I smirked inwardly. If men could be trusted, pigs would fly. I had been waiting for this. Without hesitation, I slapped Adam hard across the face. The crisp sound echoed in the empty hall. Stop dragging girls down just to save yourself. I said sharply. Even if you have issues with Emily, she's still your classmate. We all have to see each other every day. Don't make things worse for everyone. Adam stared at me, stunned, as though I had grown horns. You were bullied by Emily too. How can you defend her? So he knew. He had always known. Even in this lifetime, he was fully aware of everything. I had been bullied by Emily Carter because of Adam Green. Yet, he acted as if it didn't matter. Now that it was happening to him, he was suddenly panicked. I mimicked his past indifference and actions. And now he was the one feeling the urgency. How ridiculous. If the knife doesn't cut into your own flesh, you'll never know the pain. I shook off his hand forcefully and called out toward the door. Emily Carter. Emily Carter. Adam's eyes widened in alarm. Who are you calling? Who else? Of course. But Emily. I replied with a smile. Emily strutted into the small auditorium, her lackeys trailing behind her, a cigarette dangling from her lips. She sneered as she approached. Emily had no love for me either. She spat in my face and barked. Drop that servile act. You little toady. It makes me sick. Without any reason, she slapped me hard across the face. Just looking at your pathetic, innocent face pisses me off, she said coldly. At least this time you were smart enough to come tell me. I lowered my head, staying silent. Like a frightened quail, I shrank into myself, letting her vent her frustrations. To her, bullying someone as timid as me was meaningless. She ordered her lackeys to kick me out of the auditorium, leaving me curled on the floor and trembling. Emily smirked as she pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. Adam Green, you've got some nerve. Didn't you agree to be my dog yesterday? And now you're sneaking around behind my back. I didn't dare lift my head, but the sound of his cries told me exactly what was happening. The lackeys kicked me like a soccer ball, sending me rolling out of the auditorium. Get out, you spineless coward. One of them sneered, their laughter laced with cruelty. If you stick around and piss us off again, you'll regret it. Feigning fear, I nodded quickly and added in a trembling voice. I think I saw someone coming this way just now. If anyone. One of the lackeys frowned. Don't worry about it. We have the key. Just keep your mouth shut. Once I was out, they locked the door from the inside. I made sure they didn't notice as I slipped a crowbar onto the handle, jamming it shut from the outside. The dark auditorium reeked of something sharp and acrid. Gasoline. It was the same gasoline Emily had used to threaten me in my past life. During that terrifying moment when she took humiliating photos of me, and threatened to burn me alive. Now it was their turn to feel the fear. I removed my jacket and placed it in the most flammable spot in the room. The student name tag sewn onto it bore the unmistakable name, Adam Green. A small flame ignited with a faint crackle. The fire quickly spread along the trail of gasoline, weaving through the room like a spider's web. The auditorium, rarely used except for monthly maintenance, was now engulfed. The next scheduled maintenance was still weeks away, and thanks to Emily's paranoia, the window locks had been sealed to prevent any of her victims from escaping during her usual bullying sessions. The fire spread rapidly. Through the glass windows, I could see Emily and her group beginning to panic. "What's going on?" one of them shouted, their voices muffled but frantic. "How did it catch fire? Open the door. Quick." Faced with a life-threatening situation, Emily Carter no longer cared about beating Adam Green. She frantically pulled her lackeys toward the main door, abandoning Adam, who lay sprawled on the ground, stripped of his dignity and gasping like a dying dog. Reaching the door, one of the lackeys yelped as the scalding hot handle burned his hand. He recoiled in pain, unwilling to touch it again. Emily, irritated, grabbed his hand and forced it back onto the lock. "What are you acting all delicate for? It's just a little heat. If you don't open this door now, we're all going to die in here." The lackey screamed as blisters formed on his palms, and when the lock fell to the ground, it landed squarely on his foot, prompting another howl of pain. Emily slapped him across the face. "Shut up. Do you think screaming will help us get out?" Humiliated but helpless, the lackey trailed behind her, trying to assist in breaking the door down. Emily kicked it hard, and the door cracked open slightly, a thin, finger-width gap. But no matter how hard they tried, it wouldn't budge any further. "What's going on? Why won't it open?" Of course, it wouldn't open. I had locked it from the outside. As Emily finally began to panic, I remained calm and collected. Slowly, I strolled over, sucking on a lollipop, and peered at her through the narrow gap in the door. The moment she saw me, Emily's eyes filled with rage. She screamed, "You bitch! What are you standing there for? Open this door right now." I acted as though I hadn't heard her, idly cleaning my ears in plain view of her furious face. Emily's frustration boiled over. "You just wait. When I get out of here, I'm going to kill you." I smiled lightly. "Is that how you ask for help? You've got the wrong attitude. Emily. Oh, and by the way, you're not getting out of here." As her expression twisted with fury, I grabbed her hand, which had reached through the gap in an attempt to move the crowbar blocking the door. I pressed her hand against the burning hot door handle, and she screamed in pain, shouting more threats at me. "Does it hurt?" I asked mockingly, watching her face go pale. Then, I poured gasoline right through the gap, splashing it onto her face and clothes. What are you doing to me?" she shrieked. "Gasoline," I replied calmly, pouring more onto the door and the frame. "Surely you can smell it, right?" Emily cursed at me, stumbling backward. "Get that bastard Adam to grab the crowbar. If he doesn't, we're all going to die." Her lackeys grabbed Adam and forced him toward the door, shoving his hand toward the crowbar. But before he could move it, I dumped gasoline onto his arm and tossed a lighter through the gap. The flame ignited instantly, engulfing Adam's prized piano playing hand in fire. His screams filled the auditorium, raw and guttural, as he flailed in agony. "Useless," Emily shouted, furious. "You can't even move a crowbar. Hurry up and get it out of the way." Ignoring Adam's suffering, she pressed him closer to the door, desperate to escape. But she failed to notice that the flames from the gasoline outside were already creeping toward the interior. The fire spread quickly, climbing up Adam's body. His screams grew louder, but Emily didn't stop. She only cared about saving herself, even if it meant stepping over the burning corpses of everyone else. In Emily Carter's world, those beneath her were nothing but stepping stones. But she forgot one crucial thing. Even a cornered rat will bite. As the flames consumed him, Adam's eyes filled with something new. Hatred. Absolute, unrelenting hatred. Adam Green, engulfed in flames, threw himself at Emily Carter, his burning body igniting the gasoline on her face and clothes. In that moment, Emily let out the first truly guttural, piercing scream of her life. The kind of scream that only comes from someone experiencing unbearable pain for the first time. It hurts. It hurts so much, she wailed. So even the lofty, untouchable princess feared death and pain after all. Her lackeys, frozen in terror, screamed and shouted, but they didn't forget to hurl threats at me. You'd better call the fire department. If you don't, you're just standing by and letting us die. I smiled even more brightly. The security cameras were already broken by Emily. What evidence is there to prove I was ever here? I took a few steps back, savoring the scene. Enjoy the grand finale of your lives, I said softly. The flames roared, consuming everything in their path. It wasn't just the physical building that burned. It was as if the fire was purging the hidden sins of the school itself. By the time school officials discovered the fire and called the fire department, the auditorium had already been reduced to charred rubble. Emily's 4 lackeys had all died from excessive smoke inhalation, while Adam Green suffered the worst fate. He was burned alive. His death gruesome. 10 fingers, 4 of them bitten off, fractured leg bones, broken ribs. His injuries suggested unimaginable torment before he succumbed, but no one cared about his death. He was just an orphan, a boy whose once prosperous family had fallen to ruin. His death rippled across the community like a drop in a vast lake, causing only minor waves that quickly disappeared. Within a few days, everything returned to calm. Unexpectedly, Emily Carter survived, severely burned and disfigured. She lost an eye and was left in a vegetative state. Her family was furious and sought to hold the school accountable, but all evidence pointed to Emily being the aggressor who had sought out Adam. Witnesses, some unafraid of the Carter family's power, revealed that Emily had been obsessively pursuing Adam, and this chain of events had unraveled her history of bullying. The Carter family, fearing further exposure, chose to retreat quietly, applying pressure only in private. But in the end, the official conclusion labeled the incident as a result of Emily's history of bullying Adam, who had retaliated in anger. The Carters had many grievances but little recourse. I wrote an anonymous report. In my past life, the reason Emily's bullying stopped after 3 years was because a government inspection team uncovered corruption among the Carter family's protectors. The anti-corruption campaign took down some powerful figures, leaving the Carter family without their protective umbrella. Forced to act more discreetly, they laid low after that. In this life, I knew exactly what to do. The moment I was reborn, I began collecting evidence. I found newspaper reports from my past life that detailed corrupt practices tied to the Carters and secretly compiled the information into an anonymous tip. Then, I took leave from school and traveled to another province to report it in person. There's a saying, it doesn't matter how you treat me. What matters is that you're no longer in my way. The position beneath a big tiger, a metaphor for those in power, was coveted by many. When someone delivers a target on a silver platter, as long as the initial investigation checks out, there's little chance the matter will be ignored. When the Carter family tried to pursue further action, their protective umbrella had already fallen. The powerful figures shielding them had been taken down, leaving the Carters seething with frustration. All they could do was ensure that Emily Carter, now a vegetative shell of her former self, remained alive in the hospital. With Emily gone and Adam Green out of the picture, my life became much smoother. Relying on the knowledge from my past life, I chose to major in information technology in college. After graduating from a prestigious university, I boldly joined a small startup that was little more than a factory at the time. As their 9th employee, I received original shares and grew alongside the company, which soon evolved into a tech giant. Within 10 years of graduation, my assets had reached staggering heights, and it had only been 17 years since that fire. When I decided to step down as CFO of the company and transition into life as an angel investor, ready to enjoy the rest of my days, I received news. Emily Carter had woken up. Out of curiosity, I made a special trip to see her. The person staring back at Emily from the mirror was a grotesque shadow of her former self. Her hair was nearly all gone, her face marred by scars that twisted her features into something almost inhuman. One eye was missing, and the empty socket on the other side had shrunk into a hollow pit. As she took in her reflection, Emily let out a blood-curdling scream and shattered the mirror in front of her. The sight left me in high spirits. That evening, I returned home and played my violin for hours to celebrate. The very next day, I received the news. Emily Carter had jumped from the hospital roof. She was dead. This time, there was no self-righteous atoning lover to avenge her. Let those two vile souls rot together in the underworld, bound in eternal misery. As for me, I only needed to enjoy the smooth, fulfilling life that was finally mine. Reborn to the moment with the work incentive voucher. I relinquished my outstanding worker title to Emma White. Jonathan, now looking over 30 years younger, opened his mouth and called me Emma. His thin-skinned personality and soft nature had caused him to fail in interviews before. Hearing him say Emma White's name always came with a sticky, ambiguous tone. I wasn't furious just yet. This time, if he failed to secure the election, his family would pressure him into marriage. I had returned to the time after Jonathan and I were introduced through matchmaking, only to stumble upon him and Emma White acting intimately. The day Jonathan came to confess, he said, "If you're willing to step aside, I'll marry you." His words were hauntingly identical to those from my previous life. Back then, I was livid. Without hesitation, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face, sending his glasses crashing to the ground where they shattered. His pale, delicate face instantly turned beet red. "You slapped me, Sarah," Jonathan exclaimed, incredulous. "With your ridiculous face, you still think you can seduce someone?" I retorted, "I'm hitting you because you're a shameless hypocrite." Rolling up my sleeves, I raised my hand again, determined to settle both old and new scores. Jonathan clutched his chest, visibly stunned. I was only missing a proper weapon. If I had one, I might have sent him straight to meet Karl Marx. Just then, Emma White jumped out, yelling, "Sarah, you're insane. Somebody help. She's hitting people." I grabbed her braid and delivered another resounding slap, turning her face as red as a steamed peach. "I'm not just hitting him. I'm hitting you too," I declared. "Your so-called platonic love. I'll beat it into your skin, your spirit, and your soul until you both remember the unbearable pain of this life." Jonathan was almost blind without his glasses, unable to tell people from objects more than a few feet away. Emma White, a frail beauty, had barely stepped outside in her life. Dealing with the two of them was a breeze. When I grew tired, I clapped the dust off my hands and sneered, "You two really deserve each other. The next time you dare show off in front of me, I'll beat you again." Before leaving, I couldn't resist stomping on their faces one last time. I planned to head home to check on my father and sister. But behind me, Emma White cried out, "Sarah, I'm going to report you to the authorities." I laughed. "Go ahead. But if anyone asks why you got beaten up, do you even dare tell the truth?" Jonathan suddenly remembered the reason he came, to ask me to give up the outstanding worker title. He quickly grabbed Emma White's arm and muttered, "Emma, she shouldn't have hit us. But you need to let it go." "Let it go," Emma protested. "Why should she be allowed to hit me? On what grounds?" "On the grounds of your shamelessness," I snapped, my anger reigniting. "Jonathan, why don't you repeat what you just told your dear Emma White? Go on. Say it out loud if you dare." Cornered, Jonathan stammered and hesitated, his face looking as though it was being roasted over a fire. Finally, he mumbled, "I love Emma. I did it for you." I scoffed. I knew Jonathan all too well. His indecisiveness in matters of the heart had plagued him his entire past life. "For me? If it's for me, then why can't you be honest with me?" I retorted coldly. "Clearly, I don't even matter to you." Emma White, sensing an opportunity, pressed, "Jonathan, what do you mean? For me? Tell me now." Jonathan stuttered. "I mean, for you. I agreed to marry Sarah, but I swear, it was all for you." Emma stood there, dumbfounded. I burst out laughing. "Oh, so this is how Jonathan shows his love for you. Emma, he loves you so much that he insists on marrying me? All for you? And you still think I shouldn't have beaten him?" Looking at them, I added mockingly, "You two pests really make the perfect pair. If you ever cross paths with me again, I swear I'll beat you both to death." At this point, Jonathan pointed at me furiously, yelling, "Sarah, you're nothing but a shrew. You'll never understand the bond Emma and I share." If it weren't for helping Emma win the outstanding worker title, I'd never have agreed to marry you. Forget everything I said before. You're not even worthy of marrying me. You'll never get me either. I spat. Emma White was instantly moved to tears, sobbing uncontrollably as she threw herself into Jonathan's arms. Jonathan, I knew you were doing this for me, she cried, her voice soft and saccharine. Emma, I sacrificed myself for you. My heart belongs only to you, no one else, Jonathan said tenderly, holding her close. I clapped my hands loudly. Bravo! That was beautiful. Did everyone hear that? Jonathan and Emma, still embracing, froze and turned around to see the factory manager, the workshop supervisor, and several co-workers who had just finished their shifts standing at the alley's entrance. Their faces were etched with disbelief and scorn. In my previous life, when Jonathan proposed marriage under similar circumstances, I had only paused in confusion for a moment before he hugged me tightly. He spoke of how he would treat me well, how we would get married, and how the outstanding worker title wasn't that important. Back then, I was an innocent young woman, unaccustomed to such close contact with a man. Besides, Jonathan was indeed considered a handsome and promising young man in the factory. In that moment, I forgot to push him away. Coincidentally, the factory manager had been passing by, pushing his broken bicycle. When he saw us, the situation was as ridiculous as a roasted duck refusing to die in peace. This time, because of the fight, I had no hope of keeping the outstanding worker title. Emma, pretending to cry, overheard that I had lost my qualification and couldn't hide her glee. However, when her tears smeared into one of her injuries, the pain made her wince, exposing her true feelings. Her delicate, sickly beauty turned into a busy performance of false sorrow and real discomfort. Jonathan couldn't help but chide the doctor. Be gentle. Emma's afraid of pain. Emma shot him a coquettish glance, which Jonathan returned with a gaze full of misplaced affection. The factory doctor was visibly disgusted. Even while being treated in the infirmary, they couldn't behave themselves. If they thought my blows were heavy, they should just go to the hospital. Outside the infirmary, a crowd of people pretending to be passing by gathered to watch the spectacle. So that's the infamous couple who got beaten up. Yeah, the woman isn't competent at work. So she sent her lover to seduce Sarah. Sarah couldn't take it and beat him up. And the woman? She got caught in the crossfire. Huh. Both of them got what they deserved. All for a title. Jonathan, the so-called genius, turned into a fool for her. They look so pitiful just now. And Jonathan still has the nerve to call himself single and try to date other women in the factory. Well, he's a genius. One isn't enough for him. He probably wants to pick and choose a few more. I knew these rumors would spread like wildfire through the factory. Public opinion had always been uncontrollable. But among the gossip, a few dissenting voices emerged. Emma White is pure and quiet. Maybe Sarah deliberately beat her out of jealousy. I think Jonathan and Sarah don't match. Sarah probably hit him because she's mad Jonathan didn't choose her. A young, beautiful female worker chimed in boldly, drawing attention from those around her. Her companion tugged at her sleeve, but she brushed it off nonchalantly. Just then, a commotion erupted outside the infirmary. Who dares bully my girl? The doorway darkened as a burly, broad-shouldered man stepped inside. Backlit by the sun, his figure seemed larger than life. He wore an oil-stained factory uniform, a wrench tucked into his belt, and his strides exuded rugged confidence. It was my father, Mr. Carter. Hearing that I was in trouble, he had rushed over with a few apprentices to back me up. My tears flowed instantly. The memories of my previous life felt so distant now. It had been over 30 years since I last saw my dad. Mr. Carter. Overwhelmed with emotion, I sobbed uncontrollably and threw myself into his arms. Dad, clearly shaken, said, "Who dared to wrong my daughter like this?" The apprentices behind him exchanged shocked glances. "Oh my God, this is terrifying." One of them murmured, "Sarah's actually crying. Who's the bastard responsible? Come out and take your beating. Who's the scumbag that made my sister cry so hard she's calling for her dad?" Another added, "Everyone in the factory knew my dad, Mr. Carter, as a tough, no-nonsense man who never backed down from a fight. The moment he arrived, Jonathan panicked and darted into the inner room, slamming the door shut and locking it from the inside. The force of the door shutting knocked over some bottles on the cabinet, shattering them with a sharp crash. I clung to my dad's arm, crying so hard I could barely speak. My dad turned his piercing gaze toward the two so-called lovebirds inside the room. Jonathan and Emma, still huddled together, trembled as they looked at us like scared pigeons facing a pack of wolves. "Who are these people?" Sarah, Dad asked. Jonathan, trying to recover his composure, spoke up. "Mr. Carter." "It's me, Jonathan." Dad furrowed his brow, struggling to recognize him. "Jonathan? And who's this girl?" Emma chimed in. "I'm Emma White." "Oh, Emma White," Dad said sarcastically. "The sickly girl from the White family. Huh, you seem to handle a beating pretty well." Jonathan, encouraged by Dad's relatively calm tone, stood up straighter and said, "Mr. Carter, your daughter has truly disappointed me. Even if she wouldn't agree to my proposal, that doesn't give her the right to attack me and the innocent Miss White." "Ha!" Dad scoffed, his fists clenching. The factory manager, workshop supervisor, and a few bystanders listened intently as Jonathan shamelessly twisted the story. But trying to manipulate the truth in front of my dad was a mistake. Just as Dad narrowed his eyes and raised his massive, callous fists, a powerful, furious voice rang out from outside. "Innocent? Who said he's innocent?" "My mother, Mrs. Carter," stormed in, one side of her hair styled in freshly set curls and the other still in rollers. Her hands were on her hips, and her glare could cut through steel. With a commanding step forward, she announced her presence. "Mom!" I stumbled forward and hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. Mom's expression softened for a moment before she snapped. "Stop crying. He's not worth the tears. He's nothing more than a two-faced dog of a man. We're better off without him." Behind her, Aunt Linda, a close friend of Mom's, appeared with the matchmaker who had introduced Jonathan and me. The matchmaker, her hair also half curled, seemed to have rushed straight from the salon. "Emma White," Aunt Linda called out sharply. "Let me ask you this. Did you know that Jonathan was seeing Sarah through a matchmaking arrangement?" All eyes turned to Emma, under the weight of everyone's stares. She muttered a barely audible yes. Aunt Linda didn't hold back. "You knew? Then you deliberately stole another woman's man, didn't you?" Emma, flustered and teary-eyed, tried to cry again. Aunt Linda cut her off. "Save it. How about stepping out of his arms before you start crying?" "Huh." Only then did Jonathan and Emma realize they were still clinging to each other. Awkwardly, they separated, their faces pale with embarrassment. "Mrs. Carter, it's not what you think," Jonathan stammered. "Emma and I." Mom didn't even spare him a proper glance. "Tisk. Look at you, all beaten up and pathetic. Serves you right," she said, her disdain evident. "Jonathan, you're out here hugging Emma White in broad daylight, in front of everyone, and you still don't have the guts to own up to it? What kind of man are you?" Jonathan faltered, his confidence wavering. Emma, standing behind him, timidly tugged at his sleeve. When he turned to look at her, the pitiful expression on her face reignited his protective instincts. "We just confirmed our feelings for each other," Jonathan said weakly, referring to himself and Emma White. "Oh, so you're admitting it now? Straight from your own mouth," Mom said with a sarcastic laugh as she calmly pulled up a chair and sat down. "On the way here, I heard from someone that you, Jonathan, declared in front of the factory manager, the workshop supervisor, and several new employees that you are someone Sarah can never have. Well, let me tell you, my daughter doesn't need to waste her time on someone like you," Mom added, glaring at him. "But you and Sarah have been acquainted for a few months now. Funny how you didn't confirm your feelings earlier. Only after Sarah caught you and Emma White red-handed did you suddenly decide to come clean." Aunt Linda clicked her tongue in disdain. "Doesn't this sound like one of those philandering men from folk tales? Juggling women and pretending to be innocent." Mom nodded in agreement. "Everyone can see what's happening here. Today you like one woman, tomorrow it's another, and the day after, you're sacrificing yourself for someone else. What is this? Some kind of matchmaking contest? Tell me, does a man like this deserve a beating or not?" As Mom's words hung in the air, Jonathan's face turned green with shame. I'm not like that. Jonathan protested. Yes, I went on a date with Sarah, but my heart belongs to Emma White. Mom seized on his words immediately, slapping the table and raising her voice. Hear that? Everyone. First, it was Sarah, and now it's Emma. Tell me, Jonathan, aren't you just playing with people's feelings? I wasn't playing with anyone, Jonathan exclaimed defensively. I made it clear to Sarah that we weren't going to work out. Of course. It's not going to work out now that you've been caught, Mom retorted. But you wanted to marry my daughter, didn't you? And then you wanted her to give up her chance at the outstanding worker title so Emma White could take it. Everyone heard you say that. Right. Jonathan could only nod. So, was it Emma who begged you to make that sacrifice? Mom asked, her sharp gaze turning to Emma. Emma instinctively shook her head, trembling under the scrutiny. Then it must have been your brilliant idea, Jonathan, Mom said with biting sarcasm. What's next? Marrying you would make someone a queen or a concubine. Is being your wife supposed to be some kind of grand honor? She slapped the table again, making everyone in the room, guilty or not, flinch. Jonathan, your behavior today has been eye-opening for our family. Let me tell you something. I, Linda Carter, have friends everywhere. Friends in the disciplinary committee. Friends in the Women's Federation. Even old friends in the factory's General Affairs office. And let's not forget my husband. You know how respected Mr. Carter is in this factory. He doesn't need to rally a crowd. Even a few apprentices are enough to handle the likes of you. She leaned forward, her voice icy. From now on, we go our separate ways. But if I hear even a whisper about Sarah from your mouth, take a guess at what my family will do. Jonathan pressed his lips tightly together, not daring to say another word. Finally, Mom turned to Emma and said coldly, and you, Emma White, should know better. Picking up someone else's leftovers is one thing, but don't go snatching up something someone else still wants. Even a stray cat will scratch you for that. As if on cue, the family cat, Mittens, let out a loud meow. Startling Emma, she immediately shrank behind Jonathan, trembling in both fear and embarrassment. However, she still couldn't resist sneaking a smug, defiant glance in my direction. Jonathan gently comforted her, murmuring, "Don't worry, you still have me." Standing there, watching their nauseating display, I couldn't help but feel utterly disgusted. When I finally returned home, the day's events continued to weigh heavily on my mind. I gazed around the workers' dormitory where I had lived as a young woman, lost in thought for a long time. It wasn't until dinner time, as I listened to my parents discussing things at the table, that I finally snapped back to reality. Fengxia, are we just going to let Jonathan and Emma White off the hook like that? Dad asked, his tone tinged with frustration. What else can we do? Mom replied, do you really want Sarah to lose her chance at the outstanding worker title? Everyone saw her hit them this time. Jonathan is a college graduate, and Emma is adored by so many people in the factory. If they decide not to pursue the matter, we should send some gifts and pay our respects to make sure Sarah's qualifications are reinstated. Dad, Mom, please don't. I interjected. I don't want to compete for the title anymore. Dad looked at me, his sharp gaze noticing something was off. You've always been strong-willed, he said. I've got a few young guys working under me. They're not college graduates, but they're decent. I can introduce you to one of them tomorrow. Mom snorted. Sarah crying over a man? No way. It must be about losing the outstanding worker title. I licked my lips nervously before asking, Mom, if I'd married Jonathan without knowing about Emma, only to discover later that she was in his heart, but he wouldn't admit it, and I couldn't get a divorce. If I ended up wasting my entire life on him, would that make me pathetic? Mom shrugged. Not a chance. At the very least, you do what you did today. Give those two a good beating. Maybe even strip them down and toss them into the courtyard. That was something I had actually done in my past life, though I never went as far as stripping them. Dad muttered, You've got your mom and me. We'd help you teach those two scumbags a lesson. But the truth haunted me. The year I gave birth to my son, I discovered that the family savings were gone, and the pantry was nearly empty. When I stepped out of the dormitory to buy groceries, I saw Jonathan carrying half a bag of rice and flour into Emma's house. Naturally, I stormed over and caused a massive scene. It was during that chaos that my parents, rushing back from visiting relatives, got into a car accident. Tears welled up as I choked out, "Dad, Mom, I'm so sorry." My voice broke into sobs. "Don't cry, sweetheart," Dad said firmly. "There's nothing for you to apologize for. If you feel embarrassed, that's all the more reason to hold your head high. Go to work as usual. We won't let you endure this humiliation in vain." Looking at my parents through tear-filled eyes, I slowly came to a realization. These were my parents, the people who loved me the most in the world. How could they ever hold a grudge against me? But back in my previous life, when the terrible news arrived, Jonathan had repeatedly blamed me. "It's all because of your paranoia," he'd yelled. "Not only did you ruin my reputation and career, but you also caused the deaths of your own parents. How many times do I have to tell you? I only took care of Emma because her father helped me once. Jonathan and I were always innocent," he had insisted. That day, it wasn't just Emma at the house. Her mother was there too. How could you have such a disgusting mindset to think otherwise? Your parents' deaths were entirely because of your malice and narrow-mindedness. For years afterward, Jonathan weaponized this tragedy in our arguments, accusing me of being the one responsible for my parents' deaths. He made me relive my guilt and regret repeatedly, torturing me emotionally. But the truth was clear. If it hadn't been for his ambiguous relationship with Emma, none of this would have happened. "Did you hear?" someone whispered. "Jonathan ended up in the hospital last night. His dorm mate had to rush him there." "What happened to Emma?" "She's fine. Jonathan claims it was appendicitis. Not because of Sarah's punches. At least he's trying to act like a man about it." "A man? Please. He's always been the type to eat from one bowl while eyeing the next. But what can you expect? He's the factory manager's golden boy, the college graduate who's already got half the women in the factory swooning over him. Sarah doesn't stand a chance next to him." The next morning, I went to work. Just as I expected, the workshop was buzzing with gossip. As soon as I appeared, the chatter abruptly stopped. "Oh, the demon lady's here," someone muttered. It was Towing, the same young woman who had jeered at me yesterday while watching the drama unfold from outside the window. I hadn't seen her in over 30 years. In my previous life, we'd briefly been co-workers. We hadn't interacted much, but for some reason, she always had a problem with me, nitpicking everything I did. At the time, I had been lost in the bliss of my newlywed life, proud to have married Jonathan, one of the few college graduates in the factory. He was gentle, handsome, and had a bright future ahead of him. Compared to the other young men in the factory, Jonathan was practically a rare gem. Back then, I paid little attention to Tao Ying's snide remarks, dismissing her as insignificant. But this time, Tao Ying had crossed my path at the wrong moment. I wasn't about to hold back. "You think you're so tough? Is that why you're always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong?" I snapped. Tao Ying flinched but didn't back down, her sharp tongue still going. "You're nothing but a loud-mouthed bully. No wonder a college graduate like Jonathan doesn't want you." I didn't hesitate. I ripped off my work gloves and flung them straight at her face. "You're living without shame. Do you think that'll win you any prizes?" I sneered. "If you're so desperate for the man I've already discarded, go for it. Why not throw yourself at him? Yesterday, Jonathan had Emma in his arms. Why didn't you join in? What's stopping you? Afraid you'll get turned down?" Tao Ying turned pale, her lips trembling as she tried to think of a response. "If you don't have the guts, then why don't you line up behind Jonathan's other admirers? Who knows? Your turn might come someday. But with your face, you'd better prepare to play second fiddle." That was enough to make Tao Ying burst into tears and run off. I could only assume she was moved to tears by my cutting words of wisdom. In my past life, I had a bad temper. In this one, it was even sharper. I wasn't going to tolerate anyone dragging me down again, especially not after everything I'd endured in my previous life, including the agony of breast cancer. Over the next few days, the gossip quieted down. Hardly anyone dared to talk behind my back anymore. However, Tao Ying was clearly unwilling to admit defeat. She redirected her attention to pursuing Jonathan. launching a full-fledged campaign to win his favor. One day, she brought him flowers at the hospital. The next, she made him homemade soup, playing the role of a devoted wife-in-waiting. Her friends tried to dissuade her, saying, "Tao-ing, enough is enough." But Tao-ing refused to listen. "Jonathan is the most handsome and educated man in the factory," she argued. "Even the factory manager praises his writing. The other men here? They're either clueless or unbearable. None of them can compare to him." Jonathan had already stolen Emma White for himself. Did Tao-ing honestly think she could outdo Emma, the factory's infamous sickly beauty? Apparently, even her friend had had enough of her antics and stopped getting involved. For the next few days, Tao-ing kept showing up at the hospital, bringing Jonathan gifts, meals, and flowers. Jonathan, true to his nature, accepted everything without outright rejecting or encouraging her, leaving Tao-ing convinced she still had a chance. During this time, Emma White remained uncharacteristically quiet. No tears, no drama. Meanwhile, Jonathan's written apology had already been circulated around the factory. The factory leaders, recognizing the rarity and value of college-educated employees, decided to let bygones be bygones. They noted Jonathan's supposed maturity. He hadn't filed any formal complaints about me despite being hospitalized. They were eager to sweep everything under the rug, but there was no way I was letting them off the hook so easily. By September, the northern weather was turning chilly. Tao-ing arrived at work wearing a fitted dress in a pale yellow that accentuated her delicate features. She strolled over to Jonathan, who handed her a poetry collection. "This poem," he said, "perfectly expresses the depth of my love for you." I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. The poet's original words weren't about love at all. It was a declaration of love for the land. In my past life, Jonathan had also recited poetry to me during our happier moments. But back then, it was all about rivers and wild geese, with me playing the role of his ever-dutiful caretaker. Even in our best days, I was little more than a glorified housekeeper in his eyes. Tao-ing noticed my amusement. "What's so funny?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I'm laughing at how some people don't even realize how foolish they are," I replied. Tao-ing, undeterred, straightened her posture like a fighter ready to attack. "Oh, really? What did you and Jonathan ever talk about? Poetry? Literature? Or just the price of duck eggs at the market?" Feigning a serious tone, I replied, "Oh, we discussed everything. Marxist theory, political policy, industrial strategies, the path from the Industrial Revolution to modern reforms, poetry, philosophy, you name it." With each subject I listed, Tao-ying's expression darkened further. By the end, she was practically fuming. "Do you even know who Ai Ching is? Or what he wrote about?" I added, twisting the knife. "You're out here talking about love and romance, but you don't even know the basics of literature." Tao-ing finally snapped. "What makes you so special? You've only got an elementary school education. Jonathan would never pick you over me." I smirked. "Jonathan's been in the hospital for how long now? Has he even mentioned your name once? All this time you've been parading around in front of him, throwing yourself at him. Has it worked? Has he confessed his undying love for you yet?" I leaned closer. "At least with Emma, Jonathan could fake some affection in front of me. But you? You're nothing. You're just standing here, shouting about your so-called love. Tell me, are you the land he loves so deeply? Or is it something else entirely?" Tao-ing was trembling with anger, her fists clenched. Suddenly, she slapped herself twice, hard, across her pale cheeks. Raising her reddened face, she declared, "I'll tell Jonathan you hit me out of jealousy. He'll never forgive you. He loves me, and he belongs with me." In my previous life, I'd never noticed how unhinged Tao-ing could be. Now, I was almost eager to see how far she'd go. "Then you'd better hurry up and put on your act," I said dryly. "But don't forget, you're still no match for Emma White." Tao-ing shot me a venomous glare before storming off. From a short distance away, Emma White, who had been silently crying and biting her lip, suddenly turned and hurried toward the hospital. Two rivals in love heading for the same man. I couldn't have been more amused. I glanced at the clock, then rushed to the communication office to make a few phone calls. Later that night, word spread like wildfire. Jonathan's tangled love life had finally backfired. In the hospital, Towing had collided with him in a dramatic scene, breaking 2 of his ribs. The hospital erupted into chaos. Towing and Emma White ended up pulling each other's hair while Jonathan groaned in pain. Meanwhile, 2 other women, unrelated but equally emotional, stood off to the side crying. Adding to the commotion, 2 women were shouting, and another tried to take advantage of the chaos to whisk Jonathan away. Meanwhile, the remaining women in the room hurriedly pulled him back and demanded he explain everything. Towing, with scratches on her face from Emma White's nails, realized Jonathan wasn't helping her at all and fled in embarrassment. The room was packed with other women who, like her, had hoped to catch Jonathan's attention. Fueled by frustration and rage, one of them rammed into Jonathan like a bull. Headfirst, Jonathan was sent flying out the door, landing flat on the ground and breaking 2 ribs in the process. Dad's apprentice, Sam, told the story with wild enthusiasm, even holding up 2 fingers for emphasis. At the time, we were sitting at a street food stall with a few of Dad's younger apprentices, enjoying skewers and cheap liquor. I downed a shot of white wine in one go, relishing the news and feeling quite satisfied. When Jonathan got knocked out the door, he took someone down with him. Sam added, grinning. Guess who it was? Sarah. I didn't reply, but the young men around us were impatient. Don't leave us hanging. Just tell us already. Sam leaned in conspiratorially. It was a higher up from the government. Someone visiting undercover to inspect the area. It's like one of those secret royal visits. You know? Turns out he wasn't feeling well, and decided to go to the hospital for a low-key checkup. Then bam! Jonathan crashes into him and sends him to the ground. The guy ended up with a fractured bone. One of the boys interjected, "You've got to be kidding. That's too much of a coincidence." Sam scoffed. Coincidence? More like karma. Jonathan brought it on himself. Sam continued, "While Jonathan's been in the hospital, countless young women have been visiting him, trying to win him over. He accepts their gifts, their books, their attention, all of it. He calls it connecting through literature. My sister, who's a nurse, says there's basically a steady stream of visitors. Every 2 hours, a new one shows up, talks with him for an hour, and then leaves, just in time for the next one to arrive. It's like clockwork, to avoid them bumping into each other. But then, one day, something went wrong. Somehow, all the women showed up at the same time. Towing was practically throwing herself into Jonathan's arms when Emma White walked in. The 2 of them immediately started fighting, pulling each other's hair. If that isn't karma, I don't know what is." One of the apprentices chimed in, clearly enjoying the story. Jonathan's finally paying for it. I stayed quiet, sipping my drink as the scene played out in my mind. Inside, I was thrilled. This chaotic gathering of Jonathan's admirers was precisely what I had planned. Having grown up in the factory, I knew nearly everyone. It wasn't hard to figure out who had been visiting Jonathan. As for the undercover official's visit, I remembered reading about it in a newspaper during my previous life. And Towing? She was like a rogue missile, perfectly crashing into the chaos I'd orchestrated. Back in the 1980s, Jonathan's status as a college graduate made him a magnet for attention, attracting countless women eager to win him over. Even after Jonathan and I started dating, there were still plenty of admirers fluttering around him like moths to a flame. But I wasn't one to tolerate that kind of nonsense. My temper, combined with my family's firm stance, meant that any attempts to flirt with Jonathan ended abruptly. Once, I caught a small gift left on his office desk by a young admirer. Furious, I made a scene that left a lasting impression. Jonathan finally learned to refuse such advances, and things settled down. But this life was entirely different. Emma White, with her frail and delicate demeanor, specialized in looking pitiful with teary eyes and trembling hands, like a wind-blown willow clinging to survival. At work, she was perpetually incompetent, constantly procrastinating and pushing her responsibilities onto others. Her act worked on plenty of people, but I wasn't fooled. Emma White frequently used her health as an excuse to take time off, constantly dragging her work behind schedule. After Jonathan and I had our fallout, Emma's reputation for stealing men spread through the factory like wildfire. Someone like her, daring to covet the outstanding worker title? When she couldn't achieve it through legitimate means, she shamelessly sought to benefit from men instead. This made her even more despised by the factory workers. As for Jonathan, the college graduate halo still lingered around him, but most people couldn't help but wonder, what made Emma White think she was worthy of being with someone like Jonathan? The three of us became the subject of endless gossip, especially after the hospital drama. Following the fight in the hospital room, Emma shut herself in her house and went on a hunger strike. Her mother stood outside her bedroom door with a bowl of rice, pleading with her for 2 days straight. It was yet another spectacle, ensuring everyone knew how pitiful she was. The next time I ran into Tao Ying, she was wearing a dingy gray factory uniform and carrying her belongings from the dorm. Beside her was her father, hiding his face completely under a straw hat. Tao Ying's neck was tilted awkwardly, like she'd slept wrong, and her rolled-back eyes were just as lopsided. "I just don't get it," she muttered. "Why does Jonathan like Emma White, but not me? And why you? Of all people. Don't drag me into your mess with those two scumbags," I said dismissively. "Didn't you see what happened at the hospital? Between our factory girls, the outsiders, and you and Emma White, there were 8 women in total, all fighting over Jonathan. That's enough to set up 2 full mahjong tables. And yet here you are, still obsessing about your rank in Jonathan's imaginary harem." Tao Ying's neck hurt as she tried to argue, pressing her hand against it to ease the pain. "I know his character isn't great, but his qualifications are. Don't act like you're above caring. Sarah, it's easy for you to say. Your dad works in the key workshops, and your mom's in the office. If my family background were as good as yours, I could have been the one dating a college graduate." Tao Ying's words spilled out thoughtlessly, even dragging her own father down in the process. "Why do you think I'm the obstacle between you and Jonathan?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Don't play dumb. Jonathan proposed to you, didn't he? Whatever his reasons, you're the only woman he's ever said he wanted to marry. Emma White doesn't mean anything. If he really cared about her, he wouldn't keep stringing her along without marrying her. Jonathan's just playing with her. That's all. The outstanding worker title? That was just a favor to keep her quiet. It was never about love." Her explanation hit me like a bolt of clarity. Why hadn't I thought of it that way before? But that didn't mean I was about to tolerate Tao Ying's repeated provocations. Seeing that she wanted to continue, I switched to mockery. "You don't actually like Jonathan, do you? You just want to marry him for a better life and to satisfy your vanity. The only reason you have a problem with me is because I nearly got the one thing you've been dreaming of. Now that I've given it up, you're desperate to have it, just to prove you can be better than someone else. You and Emma White have been at each other's throats for so long. But take a look around. You're not the only one with that mindset. Plenty of other girls are just like you." Tao Ying's face turned red with anger, but she couldn't refute my words. The competition wasn't just between her and Emma. It was a crowded field, and none of them stood out. "You want to stand out," I said to Tao Ying. "But in Jonathan's heart, you don't even matter. Tao Ying, there's more than one man in this world, and marriage isn't the only way to change your circumstances. How long are you going to keep fighting yourself like this? Haven't you learned your lesson yet? Being reassigned to a local factory?" I glanced at her silent, downcast expression and decided she wasn't worth arguing with anymore. I walked away, leaving her to stew in her frustration. Tao Ying, unable to vent her anger elsewhere, kicked a lamppost on the side of the road in a fit of rage. "Tao Ying," her father called after her. "It's getting dark. Let's head home before the buses stop running." Noticing her lingering defiance, he added, "I know you look down on me because I shovel coal in the cafeteria. You have high hopes and want to marry a college graduate to prove yourself. But that man doesn't care about you. Look at all those girls who visited him in the hospital. Every one of them brought books as gifts. That white girl, her house is filled with books. Sarah almost married him, and even she didn't stand a chance. So why are you throwing yourself at him for nothing?" Tao Ying crouched down, finally letting out a muffled sob. "In my past life, Jonathan wanted me as the dependable wife to manage his household, while he sought emotional comfort and artistic inspiration from Emma White's gentle, cultured demeanor. She provided him with a steady source of validation and admiration. He built a family with me, but when he had free time, He was always at Emma's house. The worst fight we had was when I confronted him about it. But Jonathan still refused to divorce me. Emma even went so far as to forge a virginity test document and post it on the factory bulletin board to prove her purity and her platonic relationship with Jonathan. The factory workers ate it up. Their illicit affair was transformed into a noble, platonic love, celebrated as a modern-day tale of philosophical connection and spiritual purity. Meanwhile, I was painted as the villain, a malicious, narrow-minded wife. Jonathan, on the other hand, was lauded as a magnanimous gentleman, forgiving me for my inability to understand their soulful bond. Back then, divorce wasn't like it is now. It was a process filled with humiliation, requiring approval from the workplace, input from colleagues, and judgment from relatives, neighbors, and even community committees. Everyone felt entitled to an opinion. At times, I even dreamed of the stray dogs in front of my house barking, telling me not to divorce. Real or imagined, it all felt suffocating. Ultimately, I didn't get the divorce. The weight of public opinion, the death of my parents, and the responsibility of raising my son held me back. My infamous reputation as a shrew barred me from promotions at work, while Jonathan's image as a kind and understanding man paved his way to success. Even my neighbors, like Aunt Linda, would tell me, if the love is gone, hold on to the money, keep him on a short leash, let him come and go as he pleases, but never let Emma White take your place. Over time, even the sweetest things can turn sour. I listened. Jonathan did start earning more money, and I treated him as nothing more than a breadwinner. We lived separately, enduring a joyless marriage for decades. But I wasn't happy. I barely lived into my 50s before succumbing to breast cancer, a lifetime of resentment and repression finally taking its toll. In this life, I cut ties with Jonathan the moment I saw through him. I made his affair with Emma White public, exposing them both. If their love was truly so deep and profound, why did it come with so much drama and resentment? Jonathan never truly loved anyone. He only cared about who could benefit him the most at any given time, placing them in the role that suited him best. And for such a selfish man, with his hollow promises and false affections, I spent an entire lifetime carrying a terrible reputation. Not anymore. If he wanted to ruin me, I wasn't going to let him succeed this time. If Jonathan wanted to play games, then I wasn't going to hold back. I'd expose him even further. After the National Day holiday, the factory announced the winners of the Outstanding Worker Awards. Each department had its own recipients. Among those stepping onto the stage to accept their awards, I finally saw someone I'd been eager to meet, Jonathan's older sister, Lisa Lou. In my past life, Lisa had been a strong and capable woman. She was Jonathan's elder sister and had always been a commanding presence in the family. This life was no different. She had a sharp, refined beauty, with an air of confidence and elegance that set her apart from everyone else. Even in the factory's plain, oversized uniform, she carried herself with a natural, intellectual grace. In this life, Lisa had been working on a local transport line and only transferred to the main factory after earning the Outstanding Worker title. After the awards ceremony, the factory held a celebratory banquet. I wanted to approach Lisa and introduce myself, but before I could, I overheard her scolding someone in a hushed tone. "Stop crying to me about marrying Jonathan," she said firmly. "If he wanted to marry you, he would have already written to our parents back home. The letter we got recently clearly mentioned a girl named Sarah Chong from a matchmaking introduction. And now, you show up out of nowhere, spouting nonsense to me. What exactly do you expect me to do about it?" I immediately recognized the voice responding to Lisa. It was Emma White, her face pale and brows furrowed. She looked on the verge of tears but hadn't quite broken down yet. "Lisa, please," she pleaded. "Come with me to the hospital. Jonathan's waiting for you." I couldn't help but laugh at Emma's desperation. "If you're saying it like that, Emma, is Jonathan about to die in the hospital?" Emma flinched at my words, and a bead of cold sweat rolled down her forehead. The surrounding chatter died down as everyone turned to look at us. I had always faced my enemies boldly and openly, never one to shy away from a confrontation. Emma, on the other hand, was already buckling under the weight of public scrutiny, shrinking in stature as if the crowd's attention physically weighed her down. Even before we exchanged words, she had already lost her composure. I watched her silently for a moment, and she gritted her teeth as if steeling herself. Finally, she spoke, forcing herself to stand her ground. Sarah, if it weren't for you, Jonathan wouldn't be in the hospital right now. That moment, I felt a surge of gratitude toward Jonathan's carefully curated image of being kind and forgiving. Wasn't Jonathan hospitalized for appendicitis? I asked innocently. Why is he still in the hospital? Are you saying it wasn't appendicitis but because you and Towing were fighting and accidentally broke his ribs while he was trying to intervene? Oh, poor Jonathan. But if that's the case, isn't his misfortune your fault? What does it have to do with me? A wave of laughter and mocking remarks rippled through the crowd. Emma White, of all people, dares to say that. She managed to steal Jonathan from Sarah, but clearly, she can't handle him. And now she's blaming Sarah for her own incompetence? How shameless. Emma's head drooped lower and lower under the weight of the ridicule. A familiar-looking coworker patted her on the shoulder, but Emma only clutched her face and fled the banquet in tears. The jeers didn't stop even after she was gone. Lisa looked puzzled by the entire exchange, but I calmly extended my hand toward her and introduced myself. Hi, Lisa. I'm Sarah Chung. Lisa furrowed her brows slightly but still smiled politely as she shook my hand. Miss Chung, how do you know me? How could I not know you? I replied with a smile. You were on stage receiving an award earlier, and the MC announced your name. It reminded me of an article I read somewhere that you wrote. Lisa looked surprised. You've read my articles? None of them have ever been published. I only sent them to my brother. Speaking in an admiring tone, I described an article I had recently read, my voice carrying just enough to attract the attention of a few leaders nearby, including the factory manager, who was particularly fond of Jonathan's writing. When Lisa heard that I had genuinely read her work, she began sharing her thoughts on the creative process, sources of inspiration, and how she structured her writing. As she spoke, the factory manager's expression shifted from curiosity to suspicion, then to delight, and finally to a knowing look. I had a hunch that Lisa kept drafts of her work in her bag, so I casually brought it up. She hesitated for a moment before pulling out a few pieces, humbly saying, "They're not very good. I'd love to hear everyone's feedback." The drafts were passed around, eventually landing in the hands of the factory manager. Among them was a piece that I immediately recognized. Jonathan had previously claimed it as his own. After reading it, the factory manager chuckled and praised it 3 times. That very evening, a notice was sent to transfer Lisa from her transportation line to the general office. In my previous life, my education level wasn't high, but I had married Jonathan, the so-called talented scholar of the factory. After our wedding, he only expected me to manage the household and didn't bother engaging with me much intellectually. Determined not to be left behind, I tried teaching myself by reading his books and articles, but my progress was slow and frustrating. The first time I met Lisa was during our first Chinese New Year as a married couple. Jonathan and I had gone back to his hometown, and Lisa was working on a local transportation line at the time. She noticed me reading newspapers and practicing my writing. Unlike Jonathan, she didn't mock or belittle me. Instead, she offered to help me improve. After returning to the factory, I often read Jonathan's articles when he wasn't around. Over time, I noticed something strange. Jonathan always had 2 copies of each article, one stored neatly in a box and the other in his desk drawer. The handwriting on the boxed copies was elegant and meticulous, clearly Lisa's. Meanwhile, the drawer copies bore Jonathan's handwriting. It became apparent to me that Lisa was the real writer behind the articles that the factory manager admired so much. Jonathan had simply copied her work and claimed it as his own. When I confronted him about it, Jonathan flew into a rage. He burned all the boxed articles and locked the desk drawer. Confused and hurt, I chose not to press further for the sake of our marriage. Years later, when I brought it up again, Jonathan dismissed me, saying, "You only have an elementary school education. There's no way you understood those drafts. You must have been mistaken." Left with no way to prove myself, I dropped the matter. In my previous life, Lisa had also earned the Outstanding Worker title but, for reasons unknown, never made it to the main factory. This time, however, With Jonathan hospitalized after our fight, and his ribs broken thanks to towing, Lisa successfully transferred to the general office. I could easily guess the reason behind this turn of events. Word of Lisa's arrival at the factory sent Jonathan into a panic. Still confined to his hospital bed, he was beside himself with anxiety. He was so desperate that he sent Emma White to try and bring Lisa from the celebratory banquet to the hospital. But Emma failed miserably. Jonathan, his face pale with frustration, scolded her. How can you not even manage something as simple as this? Emma, her eyes red with anger, retorted, how can you blame me? Wasn't it your letter to your family saying your match was a girl named Sarah Chung that caused all this trouble? Because of you, I've become the laughingstock of the factory. Everywhere I go, people are pointing fingers and whispering behind my back. And now you expect me to clean up your mess. I still ended up going. However, Lisa, for some reason, completely ignored me. Perhaps someone had said something to her. Meanwhile, Jonathan was growing increasingly frustrated with Emma White's tears, but continued to pacify her with empty words. Why don't you go find my sister? He suggested. Isn't it all for the sake of our marriage? I wanted her to have a good impression of you before bringing you home to meet my parents for New Year's. Besides, I'm in the hospital. Shouldn't my sister have come to visit me right away? Isn't that more important than attending some celebratory banquet? Hearing this, Emma felt a bit better. However, the memory of Lisa's cold attitude earlier stung, and she couldn't resist making something up. Your sister seems to be highly regarded by the leadership, she said casually. I told her about your hospitalization, but as soon as Sarah mentioned that the manager wanted to meet her, she turned and left without a second thought. Jonathan frowned. Who did you say? Sarah, Emma repeated hesitantly, observing his reaction. She wouldn't have said anything bad about me in front of your sister, would she? Do you think Lisa might be upset with me now? Jonathan's mind drifted elsewhere. He couldn't help but wonder why Sarah had shown up at the banquet. After all, she no longer had the qualifications for the outstanding worker title. Was it her family's influence? Her mother's extensive connections? And how did she just happen to meet his sister? Could it be that Sarah still had feelings for him? Emma's voice interrupted his thoughts. Do you think your sister doesn't like me? She asked, her tone a mix of coyness and jealousy. Her slightly pouty expression added a charm that could occasionally be captivating, but quickly became tiresome when overdone. Jonathan's thoughts flickered back to Sarah. Despite her blunt and fiery personality, there was a refreshing straightforwardness to her. She wasn't the most beautiful woman, but her bold features had a certain charm, and her expressions were often animated and amusing. He had once assumed that her lack of education would make her easy to control, but her temper had proven otherwise. When angered, she didn't hesitate to throw punches, leaving no room for mercy. Jonathan shook his head with a smile, returning his attention to Emma. Why would Lisa dislike you? Emma, you're beautiful, educated, and thoughtful. Of course, she'll like you. Just then, Nurse Wu entered the room on her rounds. Visiting hours are over, she said, glancing at Emma. Why are you still here? Emma hesitated. Can't I stay? The nurse smirked. If you're his wife or an immediate family member, sure, you can stay and take care of him. But do you have any official status here? What do you think this hospital is? A hotel? If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. Emma cast a longing glance at Jonathan before reluctantly leaving. His response, however, was perfunctory, his smile barely reaching his eyes. Later, Lisa finally came to visit Jonathan at the hospital. His eyes lit up with anticipation, but there was no warmth in her gaze. Lisa, why did it take you so long to get here? He asked, a mix of reproach and relief in his voice. Lisa gave him a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Are you upset that I came late? Or are you upset that I came at all? How could I be upset? Jonathan replied quickly. You're my sister. Of course. I'm happy to see you. Lisa remained indifferent, her tone steady as she replied. Good. Because I'd hate to think my visit caused you any trouble. Then take care and recover well. I'll head back now, Lisa said, preparing to leave. Are you going back to the local transport line or to the general office? Jonathan asked, clearly fishing for information. Lisa didn't bother with riddles. Of course. I'm going back to the general office, she replied. Jonathan's tone grew desperate. Lisa, we're family. If I succeed, doesn't that benefit you too? Lisa let out a cold laugh. You went to college, and I went to college. Do you think those experiences were the same? Back then, I was also accepted to university, but our family insisted on sending you. You spent 4 years getting the best education in Beijing, and as soon as you graduated, you landed a job in the main factory. Meanwhile, I was stuck on the transport line, doing the same dirty, grueling work as everyone else. 4 years later, I finally made it to the city to accept an award, only to find out you'd written home, asking Mom and Dad to find a way to hold me back. First, I didn't understand why you didn't want to see me succeed. Then I saw the factory's internal publication, and everything became clear. My articles were published under your name. Jonathan cut her off. Panicked. Lisa, you can't expose me. I'm the only college graduate in the family. If you ruin my future, Mom and Dad will hate you for the rest of their lives. Lisa stared at him for a long moment, her gaze filled with disappointment. Finally, she held out her hands, showing the calluses and scars from years of hard labor. These hands were once meant for writing. Now, maybe they can hold a pen again. With that, she turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she said, Do you really think you still have a future? You've been caught up in 2 major scandals over your relationships. Do you think no one's reported you? You've been in this hospital for so long. How many of your former coworkers have come to visit? You've crossed the wrong people from the very beginning. Lisa left, leaving Jonathan pale-faced and silent. I later ran into Lisa again in the factory cafeteria. I waved to her from a distance, and she responded with a polite nod and a courteous smile. Lisa had been working at the general office for a month now, and had undoubtedly heard all the rumors. She was too smart not to figure things out. At the awards banquet, I had intentionally brought up her drafts to reveal Jonathan's plagiarism in front of the factory manager. Regardless of how things unfolded, Lisa still saw Jonathan as her brother. I had used that bond to my advantage, and while I felt a twinge of guilt, I was also pleased. I had changed her trajectory. She could now stay in the city and wouldn't have to return to the countryside to endure an unfortunate marriage. On my way home, carrying a box of gifts, I ran into Jonathan. He looked pale and weak, clearly not fully recovered from his injuries. Leaving the hospital so soon? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Didn't they say it takes at least 100 days to heal from broken bones? Jonathan gave me a pitiful look. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I smiled sweetly. Oh, you realize you were wrong? Do you want me to hit you again? Jonathan flinched but pressed on. Sarah, I know you're angry because I proposed to you with the ulterior motive of having you give up the outstanding worker title to Emma White. But I regret it. Emma is shallow and overly dramatic. She relies on me for everything and could never be as strong and independent as you are. I raised an eyebrow, amused. Weren't you the one who criticized me for being too simple and rough around the edges? That's just your honest and straightforward nature, he said quickly. I used to think your education level was too low. But even with only an elementary school diploma, you were nominated for Outstanding Worker because of your undeniable capabilities. You're not conventionally beautiful, but your composure and decisiveness give you a unique charm. I laughed. Wow, Jonathan, it seems like only when you're cornered do you start appreciating all my good qualities. In my previous life, after over 30 years of marriage to this man, he never saw me for who I truly was. Jonathan never had a kind word to say about me, not even a fabricated one. So I, with all the patience I could muster, responded, What a load of crap. As I turned to leave, Jonathan hurried to stop me, desperation in his voice. Sarah, please forgive me. I really know I was wrong. I turned around and punched him square in the jaw. Jonathan stumbled back, clutching his face, and landed on the ground with a thud. You know you were wrong? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Let me list them for you. You entertained every woman who pursued you, playing the role of some time management genius, making each of them believe she was your one and only. Wasn't that your first mistake? Then, you tried to insult Emma White while flattering me, thinking I'd fall for your tricks. You set the two of us who had no quarrel to begin with, against each other, judging us by your twisted standards. Wasn't that your second mistake? You came to the factory with leadership's high expectations. Yet instead of working hard, you focused on crafting a fake image of a brilliant scholar. Behind their backs, you did countless shameful things that disgraced that title. Wasn't that your third mistake? And now, after all your wrongdoings, you come apologizing to me, assuming I'm too stupid to see you for the hypocrite you are. Am I wrong? The more I spoke, the angrier I became. Without thinking, I opened the lunchbox I was carrying and dumped its contents on Jonathan's head. Here's your soul food, I said, brushing off my hands. Since you just got out of the hospital, I won't beat you anymore. But mistakes have consequences. Accept whatever punishment the factory gives you and stay out of my sight. Jonathan sat there, covered in sauce and looking utterly pathetic. He tried wiping his face, but the more he wiped, the worse it got. The onlookers shook their heads, some whispering, others openly pointing and laughing. Sam popped his head out from the crowd, grinning. Jonathan, you've got some nerve coming to bother Sarah again. I quickly pulled Sam aside. Let's go. Sam, no need to waste energy here. Today's a good day. Let's go grab a meal at a nice restaurant. Sounds great, Sarah, Sam replied cheerfully. Meanwhile, Jonathan wasn't about to give up. Realizing he couldn't win me over, he shifted tactics, deciding to appeal to my mother, Fengxia, instead. He showed up at her office carrying an assortment of gifts, including honey, royal jelly, and herbal tonics. Win her over with kindness, he must have thought. But Fengxia didn't even glance at him. Eat someone's food, and you'll owe them. Take someone's gift, and you'll owe them even more, she said. But my name isn't White, and I don't owe anyone anything. Jonathan pretended not to understand. Mrs. Chung, I'm here today to apologize sincerely and formally. Fengxia raised a hand to stop him. Do you see that street corner outside? Place your gifts in the middle of the road, then bow 3 times in all 4 directions. Let's see if anyone forgives you. Jonathan forced a polite smile. You're so funny, Mrs. Chung. No, Fengxia shot back. You're the one joking. Just because someone leaves offerings at a temple doesn't mean the gods have forgiven them. Take your gifts back to wherever they came from. I'm not accepting anything. Got it. The next day, Jonathan tried a new approach. He rolled up his sleeves, grabbed a broom and cloth, and started cleaning Fengxia's office as a form of voluntary service. Fengxia wasn't impressed. She sat there cracking sunflower seeds, acting as though she didn't see him. Jonathan gritted his teeth but worked diligently, cleaning from the start of the workday until closing time. As the clock struck 5, Fengxia grabbed her bag and prepared to leave. Jonathan quickly followed her. Mrs. Chung, I truly, sincerely want to apologize to you and your family. Fengxia gave him a sideways glance. Oh, so you're not here to play the role of a selfless volunteer like Lei Feng, but to serve your own agenda? You want to apologize to my entire family. So, we've accepted your apology. Now what? Do you want me to agree to let you and Sarah get back together? Fengxia's words dripped with sarcasm. I've thought about it. You might really be talented, but you have no conscience. Do you think everyone else is a fool? You bring a few gifts, do a day's worth of work, and expect to be praised like a saint? You think you can sweet-talk your way into taking a daughter we raised for over 20 years as if she's some reward. She paused for effect. My daughter, Sarah, isn't from the White family. She's not the kind of girl who cries and begs for a man to marry her. And we didn't raise her to lower herself for anyone. Jonathan froze. He had anticipated Fengxia would explode in anger, giving him the chance to kneel dramatically in public and display his supposed sincerity. But instead, her every word sliced him like a knife, peeling away his carefully constructed facade to reveal the ugly truth beneath. It's been long enough, Fengxia continued. Aren't you curious why Sarah wasn't punished at all for hitting you, while you had to fake an appendicitis attack and hide in the hospital to let things blow over? Jonathan's face turned pale. I don't know. Maybe the doctors. The doctors? Do you think they just sit around doing nothing? Or maybe you underestimated how connections work in this factory. Fengxia cut him off sharply. Jonathan couldn't respond. He stood there, speechless. as Feng Xiao's words hit him like a hammer. Working on the transport line will be good for you, she said, her tone softening slightly, though the mockery was still evident. It'll toughen your spirit, strengthen your body, and keep your hands busy. Jonathan's defeated expression was almost pitiable. Feng Xia gave him a faint smile. What? Did you think you were the only cultured person in the room? If it weren't for those chaotic years, Sarah wouldn't have only an elementary school education. But even so, she's the best daughter in the world. You think she's beneath you. But to me, you're the one who's not good enough for her. Now, go where you're assigned, and don't bother me or my family again. None of us will ever forgive you. Jonathan had always prided himself on being a man of great ability. To be dismissed as nothing by a seemingly unremarkable woman like Feng Xia felt like a lifetime wound, a humiliation he would never recover from. When Feng Xia finished recounting the story at the dinner table, I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my chair. Feng Xia, you're amazing, I said, still catching my breath. She gave a mock shiver, rubbing her arms as if shaking off goosebumps. Come on, don't flatter me. Even your dad can't stop laughing. Who isn't cultured? That college graduate looked completely stunned. Even Feng Xia couldn't help but laugh at the end. That boy's brain is like a leaky sieve, she added. He didn't even realize the factory manager's decision had already been made. He still came groveling to me, flattering the wrong person. What was he thinking? Jonathan might have been a college graduate, but he had no real foundation. Back when he was choosing a match, he had so many options. Why did he pick me? It was because both my parents held important positions in the factory, and I seemed like the best prospect for him, now that his fraudulent articles had been discovered by the factory manager. He was desperate to plead with anyone he thought might help him. Coming to my family was clearly his last resort after exhausting all other options. But then a thought struck me. Jonathan had dared to approach me. Did that mean he was no longer concerned about Emma White? If Jonathan were truly reassigned to the transport line in another town, would someone like Emma, who constantly sought shortcuts, follow him there? In my past life, the two of them had caused me so much misery. This time, they had to stick together and face the consequences. There was no way I'd let them separate and escape their shared fate. Sam later returned with news. Jonathan's been telling people he's being transferred, and saying he doesn't want to drag Emma down with him. Sounds like he's trying to cut ties with her indirectly. And what about Emma? I asked. On one hand, Emma promised Jonathan that she would wait for him no matter what. On the other hand, she began accepting gifts from another admirer, Sean Gao, a technician who had quietly been watching over her. Sean's gifts weren't cheap. Things like hero pins and black leather shoes, all highly coveted items at the time. The name Sean Gao stirred a faint memory in my mind. After thinking for a while, I finally remembered. He was that quiet man who always seemed to hover on the edges of social circles. He was the one who had defended Emma at the medical office after the fight, calling her pure and quiet, and the same man who had tried to console her at the awards banquet by patting her shoulder. In this life, as Emma suffered repeated setbacks, Sean finally stepped forward as her loyal follower. In my usual blunt fashion, I declared to Sam, Jonathan and Emma have to stay together. Sam looked at me, baffled. Why? I raised an eyebrow and replied, does Sean's widowed mother know her son is planning to be Emma's backup plan? Sam's eyes widened, then lit up with understanding. Got it, Sarah. I know what to do. Sam and his buddies soon dug up the details of Emma and Sean's rendezvous, a secluded spot in a quiet grove. Meanwhile, I had someone slip a love letter under Jonathan's pillow in his dorm. The letter, written in the voice of a secret admirer, was saccharine to the point of being nauseating, dripping with infatuation. The final line, however, was key. Perhaps there's a way to prevent your reassignment. Meet me at this location for more details. Jonathan, ever the narcissist, was thrilled. He convinced himself that his charms had won over some influential factory heiress. When he arrived at the grove, he found Emma waiting, dressed to the nines. Emma, her hair styled into neat braids, wore a white sweater and a pink skirt, paired with gleaming black leather shoes, clearly an attempt to recreate the look of a famous movie star from a poster. Emma, why are you here? Jonathan asked, confused. Emma, equally surprised, snapped, "Why are you here? Leave. Quickly." As they awkwardly argued, Sean arrived, furious, whether out of a desire to defend Emma's honor or to protect his own claim on her. Sean lunged at Jonathan and began pummeling him. "I've waited so long for Emma to notice me, and now you're here to ruin it again. Who gave you the right?" Sean yelled. Before long, a fourth group joined the chaos. Sean's widowed mother and a troop of middle-aged women stormed onto the scene. "You dare to hit my son? I'll fight you," Sean's mother shouted, rallying her group. What followed was a comical brawl. 5 or 6 of the women began hitting Jonathan, while 2 or 3 others turned on Emma, tearing at her clothes and dragging her forward for Sean's mother to slap. "You witch!" Sean's mother screamed. "You've bewitched my son. Look at you, wearing clothes bought with my son's hard-earned money. How dare you steal what isn't yours? You're no better than a thief. I should just kill you." That moment, Sam and his friends arrived as the 5th group. "Whoa, whoa, Auntie," Sam shouted. "What's going on here? What thief? What stealing? Let's calm down and sort this out." Meanwhile, someone in the factory shouted down the main road, "Hey, there's a thief caught stealing in the grove. And now there's a fight. Come take a look." True to form, a crowd quickly gathered, eager for gossip. By the end of the day, everyone in the factory knew the story. The police eventually arrived and concluded that it was all a misunderstanding. Since most of the participants were middle-aged women, no serious action was taken. Everyone was let off with a warning. Jonathan, covered in bruises and clearly humiliated, didn't dare linger in town any longer. Before dawn, he left for his reassignment at the transport line. Emma, on the other hand, ended up in the hospital. This time, her situation truly earned her the reputation of being pitiful. Sean, however, wasn't so lucky. He was given an official reprimand, effectively ruining his chances of promotion. His mother was furious, lamenting, "If you hadn't been so fixated on that witch, you wouldn't have lost this opportunity." Remembering the gifts and money Sean had given Emma, his mother began dragging her friends to the hospital daily, loudly denouncing Emma and her actions. The spectacle was so overwhelming that Emma's mother didn't even dare to visit the hospital anymore. And so, Emma stayed hospitalized, now truly the object of widespread pity and disdain. I made a point to visit Emma in the hospital, not out of kindness, but purely to watch the drama unfold. Her face was swollen and bruised from the beating, and she developed an allergic reaction, leaving her bandaged up like a pig's head. "Are you happy now?" Emma asked, her eyes glaring at me with a venomous intensity. I smiled, savoring the moment. "I'm helping you, Emma. Now the whole world knows that 2 men fought to the death over you. Your name is more famous than ever. Why aren't you thrilled? Oh, wait, you're worried about your reputation? What's that compared to the benefits you've gained? Haven't you hurt others enough to get where you are?" She didn't respond, her lips trembling as she held back tears. "But I'm curious," I continued, feigning innocence. "Jonathan owes your family a great debt of gratitude. So why is it that, when you're at your lowest, he abandons you?" Emma clenched her fists tightly, her body stiff as if holding back an emotional breakdown. Her reputation was in tatters. Her job was gone, and her aging mother had no energy left to fight for her. With her face scarred and her mother unable to provide support, finding another fool to bankroll their lives seemed impossible. After being discharged from the hospital, Emma didn't waste any time. She went straight to the transport line to find Jonathan. Jonathan wasn't faring much better. The factory's punishment had finally caught up with him. His pay was slashed, and he was stuck with the most menial labor. Once used to being admired and respected wherever he went, he now faced constant mockery from the rough workers he had always looked down upon. His spirit was on the verge of collapse. Emma's arrival was like a beam of light piercing through the gloom. Despite the scars on her face, she still carried a youthful charm that soothed Jonathan's battered soul. The two quickly decided to marry. Life on the transport line was harsh, so they returned to Jonathan's village to hold the wedding. His parents were livid. A university graduate like Jonathan, even in his current situation, still had a chance to rebuild his career. Marrying an unemployed woman with a scarred face was beyond their comprehension. But Emma wasn't one to be underestimated. During her visits to the villagers, she spread stories of how her father, a man who had once been exiled to the countryside, had taught Jonathan to read and write, thus laying the foundation for his education. The villagers were moved, praising Jonathan as a young man who knew how to repay kindness. Jonathan's parents, though uncomfortable with the flattery, were left with no choice but to accept Emma as their daughter-in-law. The wedding day, however, was the true spectacle. Lisa traveled overnight on a bumpy bus, arriving at the village exhausted and dizzy. But instead of being greeted warmly, she was led to an empty house and locked inside. "Lisa, it's for everyone's good," Jonathan told her through the door. "Mom and Dad are getting older, and the situation with me and Emma at the factory doesn't need to be spread around. I'll let you out after the wedding." Lisa was stunned. She never imagined Jonathan could be so petty as to imprison his own sister just to protect his reputation. The wedding itself was extravagant, drawing everyone from nearby towns, including the village chief and local officials. But just as the couple was about to bow to the heavens and the earth, Emma's mother burst into the courtyard, yelling, "Stop the wedding! You can't get married. Your father is still alive." The crowd fell silent, stunned. Emma's mother held up a newspaper, her face alight with excitement, pointing to a dark photo of a man's head. She exclaimed, "Look, that's him. Your father is alive, and he's a wealthy businessman in Hong Kong. He's in Beijing for a conference." And the newspaper reported it. I recognized it immediately. The crowd stared at the newspaper. But aside from the fact that the wealthy man shared Emma's last name, there was no visible evidence of any familial connection. Someone snorted loudly, their laughter piercing the silence. "Is this some kind of crazy get-rich-quick scheme?" they jeered. Jonathan's parents were particularly embarrassed. They hadn't wanted Emma as a daughter-in-law to begin with. "If you're not happy about this, let's call off the wedding," Jonathan's father said cautiously. But Emma, panicking, dropped to her knees. "Mom, Dad, your daughter-in-law is begging you," she cried. "My mother was just confused for a moment. But you can't abandon me. Not with the baby I'm carrying." Her sudden confession of being pregnant caused an uproar among the guests. It was the conservative 1980s, and such news was a moral bombshell. The village chief and other local officials turned green with embarrassment. Without bothering with excuses, they left the event immediately. Emma's mother wailed, beating her chest in despair. "Emma, you'll regret this someday." Jonathan's parents exchanged helpless glances. "We already regret it." Their expressions seemed to scream. Jonathan, meanwhile, was too overwhelmed by the escalating drama to say anything at all. Lisa and I watched the whole debacle from a nearby hill, concealed among the trees. The scene was such a farce that I nearly laughed myself to tears. If it weren't for Lisa's stoic presence beside me, I might have. "This is ridiculous," Lisa muttered, exasperated. "Let's go." Emma's mother wasn't wrong, though. Jonathan's oft-mentioned benefactor, Emma's father, really was alive. That newspaper had been placed in Emma's mailbox by none other than me. In the 1970s, Emma's father, Mr. White, had fled to Hong Kong, where he worked his way up from nothing to become a wealthy businessman. Since the 1980s, he had made several attempts to locate his wife and daughter in the mainland. But what he found shocked him. Emma's mother had been involved with several men and had even remarried. This left Mr. White conflicted. He could understand Emma's mother's actions as a means of survival, but he wasn't sure if Emma was truly his biological daughter. It wasn't until the 1990s, when DNA testing became more accessible, that Emma was confirmed as his child. She was brought to Hong Kong, where she wasted no time embracing her new life. Emma didn't even bring her mother with her when she left. In Jonathan's eyes, Emma's transformation was magical. She went from being the fragile, pitiable woman he cared for to the unattainable princess he could only dream of. Unable to reach her, Jonathan was heartbroken, so much so that he showed up at my door, begging for forgiveness. "I'll make it right this time," he said. "Let's start over and live a good life together." I slammed the door in his face with a resounding bang. "Forgive you? Hell no. Divorce me if you want. Or stay married. But you'd better deposit next month's household expenses as usual. You wrong me." and I'll happily spend every penny of your money. Even my son scolded me. Mom, you're so petty. Around the turn of the millennium, Emma returned. Her father had passed away, and while his children in Hong Kong were all brilliant and capable, Emma didn't stand out among them. She was given a sum of money and effectively cast out. For reasons unknown, she couldn't make it in Hong Kong and returned to the mainland. By then, Jonathan, who had once promised to live a good life with me, had reunited with Emma. This time, he even brought my teenage son to meet her. My son was enamored with Emma, praising her beauty, gentleness, and apparent wealth. His respect for me dwindled further with each passing day. When I confronted Emma, accusing her of always taking what belonged to others, my son cut me off. Aunt Emma doesn't need to take anything. I want her to be my mom. We're not related by blood, but she treats me so well. Isn't that proof of how kind and wonderful she is? Apparently, he'd even told Emma about his mediocre grades. He even offered to pay for me to study in the US. Mom, he said, all you do is control me and force me to study. What else can you give me? You only have an elementary school education, and you're not even half as capable as Dad. That earned him a hard slap across the face. Clutching his cheek, he screamed, how did I end up with a mom like you? In my next life, I'm going to be Aunt Emma's child. My relationship with my son deteriorated rapidly. After he failed his college entrance exams, Emma didn't follow through on her promise to send him to the US for university. Instead, she encouraged him to settle for a technical college. I tried persuading him to retake the exams after a year of preparation, but he snapped back. What do you know? You stupid woman with your elementary school diploma? Aunt Emma says Dad's the factory director, so everything here will be mine to inherit someday. I don't need to work hard. The best thing for a young man like me is to enjoy life. Watching my son grow lazier and more entitled by the day broke my heart. Eventually, I retired early and shut myself away, focusing on my own life. Meanwhile, Emma and Jonathan paraded around together as if they were married, with Emma shamelessly playing the role of the factory director's wife. Many people felt sorry for me, but all I could do was bring up divorce again. Jonathan refused. You're like a fisherman, he said. Emma and I are connected on a spiritual level, not in any material way. You already have the legal status of being my wife. What more do you want? You should be content. Emma chimed in with a sanctimonious tone. I'm not trying to break up your family. I just want to join it. Of course, I have my own home too. If you ever feel left out, you're welcome to come to my house anytime. I was speechless. How could someone dress up shameless infidelity in such noble and refined words? Every time I saw those two, I beat them so badly they ran for their lives. Perhaps it was the constant frustration that defined my life. Just over 50, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. My treatment was half-hearted. I didn't care much about living anymore. Not long after, I passed away. In my wake, my son stood before my shrouded body, crying tears of joy. Finally, he said, now Dad and Aunt Emma can be together without any obstacles. Emma and Jonathan embraced each other right there in front of my remains, shedding tears of relief and happiness. They celebrated their newfound freedom, certain that their suffering had come to an end and their rightful union was within reach. My spirit was enraged. I wanted to leap at them and tear them apart, but in the blink of an eye, I woke up reborn. After being reborn, I gained a new perspective on many things that had tormented me in my past life. Jonathan's obsession with Emma wasn't about love. It was about her wealth and the opportunities her background provided. Back then, Emma's family wouldn't have allowed her to marry a second-hand factory manager from the mainland. Jonathan, knowing he couldn't marry up, clung to me to maintain his facade as a loyal husband. He kept me shackled in our broken marriage, using his influence to block me from leaving. This way, he could preserve his reputation while continuing to exploit me emotionally, financially, and professionally. When Emma returned years later, her priorities had shifted. She enjoyed Jonathan's care but also wanted to maintain her image as a single, eligible heiress to attract better prospects. Binding herself to Jonathan wasn't her goal. She wanted both worlds. By the year I developed breast cancer, Emma had burned through most of her inheritance and failed to find someone better than Jonathan. Only then did the two of them reunite after my death, each with their own selfish motives. Jonathan built his reputation as a devoted and long-suffering husband, while Emma gained full access to his assets under the guise of their union. Both got what they wanted, basking in their happy ending. And me? My entire life had become nothing more than the foundation for Jonathan's fame, and the contrast that elevated Emma's perfect image. In this life, I made sure to bind those two scumbags, Jonathan and Emma, together early on, cutting off all their opportunities for career advancement and financial growth. I can't help but wonder how much chaos Emma will bring to the Jonathan family once she discovers her identity as the daughter of a wealthy tycoon. For now, I'll let them enjoy a few years of peace before it all comes crashing down. The day I returned to the city happened to be Lisa's birthday. Mr. Lee went all out and got her a romantic cream cake topped with fresh flowers. It had been years since I'd seen a cake like that. As the lights dimmed and the candles were lit, Lisa made a wish. She spoke in Russian before blowing out the candles. Mr. Lee, turning the lights back on, asked, "What did you say in Russian just now?" Lisa looked at me deeply and replied, "As long as someone understands, that's enough. Now, let's cut the cake." Tears welled up in my eyes. "To the best Lisa in the whole world. May you live a long life." I had understood the Russian phrase she spoke. How can you hold a gift when your hands are full of trash? Lisa had always known what I was doing. Many of the plans I had executed were far from flawless. It was Lisa who quietly covered for me. I had been reborn, and so many unresolved emotions weighed on me like a boulder pressing against my chest. I was suffocating with hate and regret, but now it was time to selectively let go of some of that burden. I returned to my studies, earning a teaching certification and later passing entrance exams for higher education. Eventually, I left the comfortable confines of the factory and moved to Beijing. During that time, Lisa was also in Beijing for a training program. At Jonathan's wedding years ago, I had freed Lisa from the locked room where he had confined her. From that moment on, we became close friends. Together, we visited the places we had promised to see in our past lives but never managed to go. The White Pagoda, the Forbidden City, Tiananmen Square. I couldn't bear to tell her about her previous life, how her family had arranged for her to marry a man who appeared honest but was secretly abusive. She had endured horrific domestic violence, locked in her home repeatedly, without escape. The man's family was well off, but he harbored a dark secret. He was impotent. Jonathan knew this and did nothing to help his sister. "Sister," he had said, "even though Emma and I have no love left, we've stayed married because divorce is shameful, disgraceful, and subject to ridicule. No matter the reason, you must stay in your marriage too." In the end, Lisa could no longer endure it. She killed the man and then took her own life. After my rebirth, I feared Lisa would cross paths with that man again. But fate had other plans. The man had fallen off a mountain and been mauled by wild animals. His body left unrecognizable. In this life, Lisa never returned to the Jonathan family after leaving on Jonathan's wedding day. Jonathan, however, never gave up on his ambitions to return to the factory's main office. He wrote letters to Lisa, begging her to help him, but she ignored him. Things escalated when Jonathan and Emma had a child. The baby was born with an unusual condition. It couldn't digest any normal food. Jonathan's parents were beside themselves, shouting at Emma in the hospital, "What kind of curse have you brought to our family? Look at what you've given birth to." The baby's condition turned out to be a physical defect. It was born without an anus. The situation became the talk of the town. Jonathan begged Lisa for money to pay for the child's surgery, and despite her reluctance, she had no choice but to hand over her hard-earned savings. The child survived the surgery but became infamous, earning the nickname No Butt. During our time in Beijing, Lisa brought a photo of the child to show me. One look at the picture, and I couldn't help but laugh. The child looked exactly like my son from my past life. "Well," I said, stifling laughter, "it seems he's finally become Aunt Emma's son after all. I hope he successfully learns to poop." Lisa burst into laughter, watching me double over in hysterics. "You're still holding a grudge?" Lisa teased, watching me laugh so hard that I nearly tipped over. "Why would I remember disgusting things like that?" I replied, "What truly makes me happy is living better than others." After parting ways with Lisa, I headed straight to the TV station. The backstage area was a whirlwind of activity as everyone prepared for the evening's gala. I was ushered into makeup and given my performance outfit. As I waited in the hallway for my turn, I hummed the lyrics to my upcoming song over and over in my head. Meanwhile, back at the factory dormitory, Mr. Lee was eagerly waiting by the television. "It's been hours. Lisa, when is she coming on?" he asked impatiently. Lisa scolded him. "Why are you in such a hurry? This is a major national gala with countless veteran performers. It's her first time performing. Being a little late is normal." Despite her calm words, Lisa clutched a tin of cookies tightly, her nerves betraying her. A few neighbors had gathered in the small living room, all anxiously waiting for a familiar face to appear on the screen. In a remote, wind-chilled village, the scene was entirely different. The only television in the village belonged to the mayor, and many residents had bundled up in thick coats and gathered in his home to watch the gala. Among them was Jonathan, who took a drag from his cigarette only to cough violently. "This cigarette is trash," he muttered. "Nowhere near the quality I used to have at the main office." Since being transferred to the transport line, Jonathan had been forced to adapt to his new surroundings, including the low-quality cigarettes his co-workers smoked. He pitied them, thinking, these men probably haven't even dreamed of good cigarettes their entire lives. A villager struck up a conversation. "Jonathan, when are you going back to the main office? And why didn't your sister come home for the new year?" Another chimed in mockingly. "Maybe he's too busy looking after that kid of his. You know, the one born without." The room erupted in laughter. Jonathan, unable to bear the ridicule, lunged at the men, but as someone who fancied himself a scholar, he was no match for the burly farmers and was quickly knocked to the ground. Suddenly, the television volume was turned up, and the sound of the announcer's voice boomed through the room. "And now, please welcome the young singer Chloe Anderson performing The Birch Forest." Jonathan's eyes shot open wide. Who is that? It can't be her." Back in the dormitory, Mr. Lee let out a triumphant cheer. "That's my daughter. That's my Chloe. She's amazing." Lisa elbowed him sharply. "Shut it, will you? Chloe's singing." Mr. Lee clasped his hands over his mouth, tears streaming down his face. The neighbors were equally stunned, some trembling with excitement. Outside, a commotion began as people rushed to spread the news. "Turn on the TV. Or the radio if you don't have one. Chloe's on TV," shouted a young man as he darted through the dormitory corridors. The factory residents were floored. "Chloe? A star? Our Chloe. In my past life, I had always loved singing, but no one believed I had any talent. After marriage, my husband and child crushed what little confidence I had left. You're a mother now. Focus on your family. Mom, you sound awful when you sing." This life took a different turn. One night, while studying at a teaching college in Harbin, I went out for barbecue with friends. After a few drinks, I spontaneously belted out the Fifth Ring Road song. A man at a nearby table listened intently and said, "You've got an interesting voice. Want to come to Beijing and try singing professionally?" I recognized him immediately. He would later become one of the most renowned talent managers in the music industry. With nothing to lose, I agreed. If singing didn't work out, I could always start a small business in Beijing. Once there, I enrolled in classes with a renowned vocal coach, learning the fundamentals from scratch. Slowly but surely, I earned opportunities to perform on stage, one after another. In 1990, I stood on the stage of the nationally televised gala, singing The Birch Forest, a song that would take the entire country by storm. My singing career soared, marking the beginning of my golden era. People praised me, saying I had a defiant yet fearless quality, a kind of resilience that captured hearts everywhere. In the entire entertainment industry, I became known for being truly one of a kind. Honestly, it wasn't due to any special tricks. I just found joy in singing loudly, partly to maintain my breast health. My career kept me so busy that I didn't even realize I had become someone's cherished memory until the early 2000s. That year, Lisa and Mr. Lee retired. I went to pick them up and bring them to live with me in Beijing. As we entered the factory compound, I had bundled myself up like a rural grandmother visiting the city for the first time. Lisa scoffed. "Why are you sneaking around? Just wait. A crowd will chase after you for autographs and photos. She wasn't wrong. A young boy suddenly darted toward me, shouting, "Mom, I know it's you. Take me away." I was wrong. Lisa and I instinctively stepped back. "Who's your mom? Why are you calling me that?" I asked, startled. Just then, an elderly woman with white hair, Mrs. White, rushed up and grabbed the boy. "You heartless brat. Your real mother isn't dead yet, and you're calling someone else Mom?" That's when I realized who the boy was, but I had no intention of acknowledging him. The boy cried, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, you gave birth to me. How could I become White Auntie's son? Mom, Dad's a vegetable now, and it's all White Auntie's fault. We're so poor we can't even afford to eat, but she won't give us any money. She even blamed Dad for ruining her chance to go back to Hong Kong to claim her inheritance. Mom, please save me." Mrs. White raised her arm and slapped the boy hard several times. "You ungrateful wretch. Shut your mouth." The more I listened, the clearer everything became. But the boy broke free from her grip, fell to his knees before me, and cried, "Mom, I was wrong. Please forgive me." I opened my mouth slightly, unable to say a word, but the boy seemed to sense something. "You still recognize me, don't you, Mom? I knew you wouldn't abandon me." Before I could respond, Lisa's brother, Robert, arrived with a team of workers. Seeing them, the boy's bravado disappeared. He bolted upright and ran, shouting, "I'm not going to a mental hospital. I'm not sick." The workers quickly chased after him. Lisa, stern-faced, reprimanded Mrs. White. "I told you to admit him to the hospital long ago, but you kept hesitating. Do you want him to end up like his father?" Mrs. White, unable to say a word, wiped away tears. Lisa finally noticed me and said, "I'm sorry you had to witness this." Then she turned to deal with the situation. Mrs. White followed behind the restrained boy, still crying. As they left, back at the old dormitory, Mr. Lee stood overseeing the workers as they stacked piles of luggage. I looked at him curiously and asked, "Was that boy just now really White Mabel and Jonathan's child?" Lisa, watching the workers move boxes, replied flatly, "Yes, that was him. He's been suffering from auditory hallucinations since he started speaking. He should have started school by now, but the condition comes and goes." She continued, "Remember when Mrs. White claimed the boy's father was some Hong Kong tycoon? Turns out, he was telling the truth. A couple of years ago, the tycoon even came looking for him. He acknowledged the child but only gave them a lump sum payment and promised a fixed monthly allowance. But after learning about her biological father, White Mabel became obsessed. Every day, she would rant about the fortune he owned, demanding to go to Hong Kong. Everyone knew if she went, she'd never come back. Jonathan probably hoped to strike it rich by going with her, so he constantly contacted people in Hong Kong. The response from the Hong Kong side was clear. They said Mr. White Sr.'s health was too poor to entertain guests. They even used the word entertain to refer to his own daughter. But White Mabel didn't care. She believed the Lee family was deliberately blocking her from going to Hong Kong. She and Jonathan fought constantly. Hearing this, I couldn't help but smirk at the absurdity of it all. That boy's mental state grew worse and worse. He would point at the TV and insist that I was his real mother. White Mabel lashed out at Jonathan, accusing him of still having feelings for me and accidentally letting it slip in front of the boy. Jonathan, shockingly, admitted he regretted everything. If I hadn't sided with White Mabel back then, would we have ended up like this? Would I have been stuck on the transport line for so many years, unable to return to headquarters? It's all because of her that I offended people I never should have crossed. Otherwise, I'd be the husband of a superstar by now. His delusions knew no bounds. In a fit of rage, White Mabel smashed Jonathan into a vegetative state. His parents, devastated by the incident, both fell ill and passed away within a year. Jonathan became no different from a living corpse, leaving only the no-exit boy behind in the Lee family. I asked, "And what about White Mabel?" Lisa answered, "She's locked up. Lawyers from Hong Kong are trying to get her sentence reduced. As for Mrs. White, she's dreaming of following the lawyers back to Hong Kong. But Mr. White Sr. remarried twice in Hong Kong, and Mrs. White herself remarried here. How could they possibly let her go to Hong Kong? They've just given her some money for retirement and nothing more. Lisa wrapped it up succinctly. It's all a complete mess. I couldn't help but marvel at the chaos. I had always known that Jonathan and White Mabel wouldn't live peacefully for long after getting together. I also knew White Mabel would cause a huge ruckus upon discovering her noble lineage. But I didn't expect it would end in tragedy. Lisa added. Now, I hear that Lisa has become the deputy factory manager. She's busier than ever and still has to take care of that boy. Honestly, when White Mabel gets out, we should just return the child to her and let them do as they please. In this life, the factory director highly valued Lisa. After working in the general office for a year, she was recommended to study in Beijing. From then on, she attended all significant events, gradually climbing the ranks. She went back to college and rose through the ranks, becoming the successor groomed by the factory director. After he retired, Lisa directly took over as deputy director, steering the state-owned factory through the tides of privatization and emerging as a celebrated businesswoman of the 2000s. Interestingly, all these achievements originally belonged to Jonathan in my previous life. Now, they had returned to Lisa. Thinking about it, it felt like karma balancing the scales. Walking out of the old dormitory, Lisa pointed to a new high-rise community in the distance. That's the new staff housing complex. Aunt Lee lives on the 10th floor and rides the elevator every day. She's thrilled. That's great, I replied. Mr. Lee added, many families have already moved there. Even Mrs. Xiao, the one who brought her relatives to the scene back then, is now helping maintain order and cleanliness in the community. She's very popular. I couldn't help but laugh, remembering Mrs. Zhao's commanding presence back in the day. As we walked, several people greeted me, and I responded with polite smiles. One woman was particularly bold and exclaimed, "So you're the famous singer from TV. I can't believe I'm seeing you in person." She introduced herself. "I'm Tanya. Remember me?" I immediately perked up. "Of course. Tanya, how have you been?" "Unfazed," Tanya replied. "I've been transferred to headquarters, working in the office now. What about you? Are you married yet?" "I married an officer," she added. "A tall and handsome one." I laughed. "I can't compete with you. With so many options, you must have had a hard time choosing." Tanya's laughter was tinged with pride and a hint of shyness. "Well, when you get married, make sure to invite me." "Of course," I replied. "Good things should be shared with good people." Tanya's expression softened into something unexpectedly bashful. Soon, Charles honked from the driver's seat of a car waiting by the factory's new main gate. My parents and I climbed in. "Hey, sis," Charles said. "You haven't been back in so long. Let me take you around for a bit." I shook my head. "No time for sightseeing. I have a flight to catch tomorrow. There's a concert in Haicheng." Sitting beside me, Lisa stroked my hand. "I always knew your hands weren't meant for holding pins. I guess they might be for tools, but I never thought they'd be for holding a microphone." I replied in Russian. And here we are. We exchanged a smile, while Mr. Lee dozed peacefully in the front passenger seat. The sunlight filtered through the windows, filling the car with a serene warmth, wrapping us all in a lazy contentment.